Chapter 2440. Clue. The woman in white stared blankly at the strange man in front of her. She did not expect this man to be so bold. Not only did he jump into the pavilion without any warning, but he also kicked the enchanting man away. Although the enchanting man's behavior was disgusting, his status in the Six Desires Palace was not low. He was the eldest disciple of the Incense Desire Palace. His name was Tan Kai, and he was an influential figure in the Six Desires Palace. However, the woman in white did not dare to underestimate the man who suddenly appeared in front of her. This man was not weak since he could kick Tan Kai away. Although Tan Kai was not on guard, he was not weak. Even if he was not on guard, it would not be so easy for others to kick him away. The crowd below the pavilion fell into a long silence. Their eyes shifted between Zhuan, who was on the pavilion, and Tan Kai, who was standing awkwardly below. They were all trying to guess the identity of this strange man. It was the first time they had seen someone who dared to ignore Tan Kai in the Six Desires Palace. Even the woman in white who was playing the zither in the pavilion did not dare to confront Tan Kai. That was why she made such a big fuss. Whispers were constantly heard below the pavilion. Tan Kai, who was not far away, was so angry that his face turned green and white. His eyes were as gloomy as dark clouds. Where did this reckless guy come from? How dare you be so presumptuous here? You are courting death. Tan Kai snorted coldly and stomped his feet on the ground like a young girl in a fit of pique. If an ordinary beautiful girl did this, it would be pleasing to the eye. However, if it was a man like Tan Kai, it would make people feel nauseous and speechless. It seems that senior brother Tan Kai is really angry. This person is going to be unlucky. Hee, this person is also reckless. I don't know where this person came from. I have never seen this person before. The crowd below the pavilion was already used to Tan Kai's strange behavior. They did not feel that there was anything wrong with Tan Kai's actions. Instead, they were all talking about Zhuan, who had appeared on the pavilion out of nowhere. Zhuan didn't pay any attention to He Kai at all. Instead, he looked at the woman in white seriously and asked word by word, "Where did you learn this song?" The white-clothed woman's beautiful eyes were startled. She thought that the man in front of her was the same as Tan Kai, here to find fault with her. She didn't expect that he was only here to ask about the origin of the song she played. "Bastard, how dare you ignore me?" Behind him, when Tan Kai saw Zhuowen's indifferent appearance, he coldly snorted and directly attacked Zhuowen's back. A trace of impatience appeared in Zhuowen's eyes. He suddenly threw a punch behind him, colliding with Tan Kai's palm. Soon after, the fist and palm intertwined, and a terrifying gale swept out. Soon after, everyone was shocked to discover that Tan Kai had directly fallen with a miserable shriek, heavily smashing into the ground not far away. His figure was in a sorry state. Although Tan Kai's strength was not bad, his cultivation was only around the middle stage Void Sky 8th step. This kind of cultivation was really nothing much in Zhuowen's eyes. Although Zhuowen's cultivation was only at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step, his strength was completely capable of defeating cultivators below the Void Sky 9th step. The white-clothed woman looked at this scene in surprise. Then, she seriously sized up the unfamiliar man in front of her. On the surface, this man's cultivation was only at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step, but he was actually able to send Tan Kai flying so easily. This person's strength was not simple. As for the cultivators below the pavilion, they were all dumbstruck. Obviously, they did not expect Tan Kai to be defeated so easily. This was too fast. "You bastard, I'm going to kill you, you bastard!" Tan Kai let out a sharp scream and immediately took out the illusory heavenly bridge. Terrifying divine power surged out, looking extremely mighty and unyielding. Everyone below the pavilion revealed a look of fear. They knew that Tan Kai was truly angry. This time he was serious. Tan Kai, who had taken out the illusory heavenly bridge, did not care whether the garden's restrictions could withstand it or not. He suddenly rushed toward Zhuan. The white-clothed woman's beautiful face changed slightly. She could not help but say, "Tan Kai, this is my garden. Do you want to destroy my garden?" At this moment, how could Tan Kai listen to the white-clothed woman's words? His mind was already filled with rage. Right now, he only wanted to teach the white-clothed youth a lesson and make this arrogant man kneel down and beg for mercy. However, before Tan Kai could even get close to the pavilion, a mountain-like black shadow suddenly descended above his head and ruthlessly pressed down on him. Tan Kai's expression changed greatly. He immediately took out the illusory heavenly bridge to block the black shadow. Unfortunately, the illusory heavenly bridge was sent flying by the black shadow, directly smashing Tan Kai into the soft soil under his feet. The others who had originally planned to leave the garden were all dumbstruck. They had originally thought that Tan Kai, who had used all his strength, would at least be able to fight a fierce battle with this unfamiliar man. However, the truth was like a ruthless slap to their faces. How was this the fierce battle they had anticipated? It was simply a crushing defeat. "So noisy," Zhuowen said impatiently. Soon after, he looked at the white-clothed woman who was in a daze in front of him and said again, "You haven't answered me yet." The white-clothed woman looked at Zhuowen with fear and said in a deep voice, "I learned this song by myself. No one taught me." "Then you can't have learned this song for no reason. You must have heard it somewhere. Tell me," Zhuowen asked closely. The white-clothed woman frowned slightly and said coldly, "I can't tell you this. Where I learned this song has nothing to do with you, right? Could it be that you want to extort a confession from me by torture?" Zhuowen frowned slightly, but did not make a move. Instead, he cupped his hands and said apologetically, "Miss, I was impulsive just now. The reason why I acted like this was because the song you played was exactly the same as the one played by a very important friend of mine. So when I saw it, I thought of it." Seeing that Zhuowen's attitude had become modest, the white-clothed woman's expression eased a lot. She said lightly, "My friend, I really can't tell you the origin of this song. I once promised the player that this song would never be related to her. Even if someone asks, I won't tell you." Zhuowen nodded and did not continue to ask. Instead, he calmed down. Since he had heard a male phoenix seeking a female phoenix in the Six Desires Palace, it meant that Moyan Wushang had probably been to the Six Desires Palace before. However, I can give you a reminder. The real player is still in the Six Desires Palace. However, I can't tell you where he is." As the white-clothed woman said this, she looked at Zhuowen with a trace of pity and sighed. Zhuowen also saw the trace of pity in the white-clothed woman's eyes. He felt a little strange. Obviously, he did not know why the white-clothed woman had such an expression. Chapter 2441. Qi Lanzhuan wondered why Palace Master Jing Yun and Yao Xiangjuan said they had never heard of Moyan Wushang. Changed his name. Zhuowen quickly thought of the details. Moyan Wushang must have changed his name after joining the Six Desires Palace. That was why Palace Master Jing Yun and Yao Xiangjuan said they had never heard of him. Zhuowen believed Palace Master Jing Yun and Yao Xiangjuan. He knew that they had no reason to lie to him about Moyan Wushang. By the way, Tan Kai is the eldest disciple of the Fragrant Desire Palace. You better not mess around and let him out. Otherwise, you will be in trouble." The white-clothed woman looked at Tan Kai, who was suppressed by the phagocytosis and lying on the ground with only his head exposed, and said indifferently. Zhuowen nodded. With a wave of his sleeve, he put away the devouring seal. Tan Kai, on the other hand, staggered out of the ground in a sorry state. He then looked at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. The white-clothed youth in front of him looked young, but he was so strong. Tan Kai thought that Zhuowen was an old monster who came to the Six Desires Palace as a guest, so he was afraid of him. "Junior Qilon, I still have some things to do, so I will leave first." Tan Kai cupped his hands and said to Qilon. Qilon smiled and said, "Senior Tan Kai, if you have something to do, you can leave first. I won't see you off." Tan Kai didn't respond to Qilan's words, but hurriedly left the garden. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He was secretly vigilant against Tan Kai. Just now, he made such a big fool of Tan Kai. He was afraid that Tan Kai wouldn't let it go so easily. Qilan seemed to have read Zhuowen's mind and said with a smile, "Senior apprentice brother, don't worry. The Six Desires Palace doesn't forbid fighting. Sparring between each other can be found everywhere. If you lose to an enemy, as long as no one dies, the Six Great Palace Masters won't care. And I know Tan Kai's character. Although he is a little pretentious, he is also a person who can afford to lose. He will only go back and reflect, not think about how to deal with you. Zhuan's eyes were strange. He didn't expect Qilin to say this. If what Qilin said was true, then his worries were indeed unnecessary. Moreover, after Tan Kai left, except for the fear in his eyes, there was no other emotion. Thinking of this, Zhuan found that the atmosphere among the disciples of the Six Desires Palace was good. At least, it was much better than the so-called 10 sects in the Great Brahma domain. By the way, this senior brother looks unfamiliar. I wonder which palace's disciple? At this moment, everyone else in the garden had left as well. Only Zhuo Wen and the white-clothed woman remained. Zhuan didn't stand on ceremony. He sat opposite the white-clothed woman and said, I am Long Wen. I am not from the Six Desires Palace. I came with Palace Master Jing Yun. My purpose is to use the Six Desires Heavenly Lake to break through my current bottleneck. The white-clothed woman looked at Zhuan strangely and said in a deep voice, You were brought here by Martial Ant Jing Yun? And you plan to use the Six Desires Heavenly Lake? Is there a problem? Zhuan looked at the white-clothed woman in surprise and asked. The white-clothed woman shook her head and said, The Six Desires Heavenly Lake is a very important place in the Six Desires Palace. Even the most outstanding disciple of the Six Desires Palace may not be qualified to soak in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. You are an outsider after all, so, can't I be guaranteed by Palace Master Jing Yun? Yun had a bad feeling. This would have worked half a year ago. However, ever since the Palace Master of the Desire Palace came out of seclusion, the requirements have become extremely strict. Anyone who wants to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake must pass the necessary tests. Otherwise, even the genius disciples of the Six Desires Palace can forget about entering. As for the people recommended by the other palace masters, they basically have no chance, the white-clothed woman said. Zhuowen's face was a little ugly. He thought that he would definitely be able to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake this time. He didn't expect such an unforeseen event to happen. This was really an unexpected disaster. Thank you for your reminder. May I know your name? Zhuan cupped his fists at the white-clothed woman. The white-clothed woman smiled and said, My name is Qilin. I am the eldest disciple of the Desire Palace. I still have to thank Brother Long for appearing and driving away that annoying guy, Tan Kai. Zhuan waved his hand. He didn't mean it. By the way, can I have the honor of meeting the real person who played the song? After chatting for a while, Zhuan continued to ask. Qilan's pretty face froze. She immediately said seriously, Brother Long, I see that you are a good person. I think it's best if you don't get involved in this matter. Otherwise, you will be in trouble. I won't tell you about the person who played the song. This matter is not only related to your safety, but also my safety. I hope Brother Long can forgive me. Zhuowen frowned. He began to realize that something was wrong. From Qilan's words, he could tell that the real person who played the song was in a bad situation. Although Zhuowen was very anxious, he didn't lose his calm. Since Qilan said it was so serious, it was obvious that things weren't so simple. Moreover, if he revealed too much of his emotions, he was afraid that Qilan would be suspicious. Although Qilan didn't seem to have a bad temperament, after all, this was the first time he and Qilan met. Naturally, he couldn't say too many important things. I was just curious. Since Miss Qilan can't say more, I won't ask any more. This Long will take his leave first. Zhuan cupped his fists towards Qilan, got up and left. Qilan looked at Zhuowen's departing back, and her beautiful eyes revealed a strange look. After returning to the Desire Palace, Palace Master Jing Yun and Yao Xiangjuan had already returned. However, both of them didn't look good. Jun, where did you go? Palace Master Jing Yun saw Zhuowen, and her complexion eased a little. Oh, I went out for a stroll. Palace Master, I saw that your complexion didn't look good. Could it be that something happened? Zhuowen asked. Palace Master Jing Yun sighed softly. Her face revealed a guilty look, but she didn't say anything. My master came out of seclusion, and he even made a bold and decisive move to reorganize the Six Desires Palace. Originally, Martial Ant had already recommended you to my master to go to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, but my master, Yao Xiangjuan said with some difficulty. Zhuan smiled slightly. He had already heard about this from Qilan, so he didn't blame Palace Master Jing Yun. After all, the Six Desires Palace was still dominated by the Desire Palace. Zhuan, I'm really sorry. Previously, I promised you that I would let you enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, but now I have to break my promise. Palace Master Jing Yun said with some embarrassment. Zhuan smiled and said, It's okay. Since I can't enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, then forget it. I don't have to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Chapter 2442. Palace Master Wu Ju Test? What kind of test is it? Zhuan had heard about the test from Qilan, but he didn't know what it was. Although he said it was fine, he still felt it was a pity to waste the chance to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. I'm not too sure about the test. It's hosted by the Palace Master of Desire. You'll know when you enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Palace Master Jing Yun said. When will the Six Desires Heavenly Lake open? Zhuan asked. Soon, there is only half a month left. When the time comes, I will take you to the Palace of Desire. Moreover, the other 5 palaces will also select several outstanding disciples to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake for the test. When the time comes, I will give one of the spots to you. Palace Master Jing Yun said. Hearing this, Zhuan cupped his fist and thanked Palace Master Jing Yun. Thank you for your concern, Palace Master. For the next period of time, Zhuan basically stayed in the room arranged by Palace Master Jing Yun. At the same time, he occasionally went out to inquire about the song, A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix. But what made him helpless was that other than listening to A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix in Qilan's garden, he didn't have any other clues. Zhuan also placed his hopes on the opening of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake in half a month. He believed that with Moyan Wushang's talent, he would definitely become the focus of attention in the Six Desires Palace. When the Six Desires Heavenly Lake opens, Moyan Wushang should also participate. At that time, he might be able to meet Moyan Wushang. Half a month later, the Six Desires Palace was very lively. Many disciples of the Six Desires Palace gathered in the huge square outside the Palace of Desire. They all knew that the entrance to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake was about to open. Although most of them didn't have the qualifications to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, there were geniuses representing their palaces. They were also here to cheer. I didn't expect the rules of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake to change. There's actually a test to enter. This time, each palace only has 2 spots. I think Senior Yao Xiangjuan and Senior Yun Maozhe from the Palace of Desire can pass the test. Senior Qi Lan from the Palace of Desire is not weak. She also has a good chance. Have you forgotten about Senior Tan Kai from the palace? He's also a very good competitor. Many disciples gathered outside the square of the Palace of Desire were excitedly discussing the test of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. There were also many disciples who regretted that they did not have the qualifications to participate in this test. They all wanted to work hard so that they could participate in this test in the future and enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake in one go. Time passed slowly amidst the discussions of many disciples. Soon, streams of light swept over from the other 5 palaces and appeared in the center of the square. 5 streams of light appeared in the middle of the square, attracting everyone's attention. These 5 streams of light were the disciples of the other 5 palaces who had obtained the quotas, excluding the Palace of Will. Zhuan stood behind Palace Master Jing Yun. Beside him was another female disciple of the Desire Palace. Her name was Yuan He, and she was the eldest disciple of the Desire Palace. Her cultivation was around the middle stage of the Void Sky 8th step. However, this Yuan He was quite fond of Zhuowen. His gaze toward Zhuowen was always filled with disdain and contempt. Zhuowen knew why Yuan He had such an expression. It was mainly because he, an outsider, had snatched a quota from the Desire Palace. Moreover, his cultivation was only at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step. Therefore, Yuan He was very unhappy with him. Other than Yuan He, There were a few other disciples of the Desire Palace who had reached the Void Sky 8th step. However, Zhuowen's arrival directly occupied one of the quotas. Yuan He, the eldest senior sister, was naturally unhappy with this outsider who had snatched the quotas of the other junior sisters. Zhuan was too lazy to pay attention to Yuan He's gaze. Instead, he looked at the other 4 palace masters with interest. Palace Master Jing Yun had already told him about the 6 palace masters of the 6 Desires Palace. Therefore, he basically knew the 4 palace masters. The 6 palace masters of the 6 Desires Palace were all women. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze fell on the Fragrant Desire Palace. The palace master of the Fragrant Desire Palace was called Xiang Lan. She was a charming young woman with an extremely hot figure. The reason why his gaze fell on the Fragrant Desire Palace was because he saw an acquaintance there. One of the 2 people standing behind Palace Master Xiang Lan was naturally talkative. However, Zhuan found that the other person was actually his acquaintance, Zhu Rui. Zhu Rui had previously said that she was a disciple of the Fragrant Desire Palace. However, her cultivation was not high and her talent was ordinary. It was basically impossible for her to be selected to participate in the test. Perhaps feeling Zhuowen's gaze, Zhu Rui glanced at Zhuan and quickly lowered her head. There was a trace of helplessness in her eyes. On the contrary, it was Tan Kai who grinned and met Zhuowen's eyes without the slightest scruple. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. Over the past half a month, Tan Kai had indeed not come looking for revenge. Zhuowen had thought that Tan Kai was as magnanimous as Qi Lan had said. However, he did not expect that this fellow had actually come looking for Zhu Rui. Obviously, Tan Kai knew that Zhu Rui had some relationship with him. Therefore, he forcibly called Zhu Rui to participate in the test. As for Zhuan, he did not know what this guy was planning. In addition, he also saw Qi Lan in the Tinyu Palace team. When Zhuowen's gaze was cast, the latter smiled slightly and greeted him. Just as the disciples of the 5 major palaces were looking at each other, footsteps came from the Tinyu Palace. Immediately, 3 figures walked out. The person in the lead was a Taoist nun dressed in a flawless white robe and her hair was tied up in a bun. The Taoist nun held a horsetail whisk in her hand. She was spotless, like a white lotus that appeared in front of everyone, giving them a refreshing feeling. Although the Taoist nun's appearance could only be regarded as ordinary, her temperament added an indescribable beauty to her. Many disciples in the square were stunned by her. This white-robed Taoist nun was the palace master of the Tinyu Palace, Wu Ju. Because she was in seclusion all year round and did not come out for a long time, most of the disciples of the 6 Desires Palace had never seen her. Now that they saw her, they were indeed stunned. Even Zhuowen felt his eyes light up the moment he saw the Taoist nun. Behind Wu Ju was a man and a woman. The man was handsome and the woman was beautiful. They were simply a pair of golden boy and jade girl. The beautiful woman was naturally not unfamiliar to Zhuowen. She was Yao Xiangjuan. As for the handsome man, Zhuowen had never seen him before. This handsome man wore a purple robe and had long hair that draped over his shoulders. He had a demonic temperament. It's senior brother Yun Maozhe. I haven't seen him for a long time. Senior brother Yun Maozhe is still so extraordinary and handsome. The moment this handsome man appeared, Zhuowen speechlessly heard many infatuated female cultivators around the plaza shouting extremely shameful names and words, causing Zhuowen to be extremely speechless in his heart. Chapter 2443. Desireless, Yun Maozhe still likes to be in the limelight. Tan Kai muttered to himself, looking a little unhappy. At this moment, Yun Maozhe's gaze landed on Yao Xiangjuan who was beside him. He thought that his attire today would attract her attention, but he didn't expect that Yao Xiangjuan didn't even look at him. Instead, her beautiful eyes landed on Palace Master Jing Yun. Yun Maozhe frowned slightly. Ever since Yao Xiangjuan came back, he felt strange. Back then, he and Yao Xiangjuan were the most outstanding disciples of the Desire Palace. Their relationship wasn't bad. Although they weren't Dao companions, they were quite close. Back then, the two of them were the golden boy and jade girl that the disciples of the 6 Desires Palace thought would become Dao companions. However, ever since Yao Xiangjuan came back, she was cold to him. Usually, they would only speak a few words. Yun Maozhe followed Yao Xiangjuan's gaze and landed on Palace Master Jing Yun's side. He immediately saw Zhuowen standing behind Palace Master Jing Yun in white. Yun Maozhe had heard about this white-clothed young man. It was said that this young man saved Palace Master Jing Yun's life in the Divine Pill secret realm. In order to repay this young man, Palace Master Jing Yun had suggested to Wu Ju to let this young man enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. However, Wu Ju rejected her. Now that this young man was here, it seemed like he wanted to let this young man participate in the test. It seems like Junior Sister has been bewitched by this little bastard? Yun Maozhe saw Yao Xiangjuan's gaze fall on Zhuowen from time to time. His face was a little gloomy, and his gaze toward Zhuowen was a little unfriendly. Zhuowen also noticed Yao Xiangjuan's gaze. He nodded at Yao Xiangjuan symbolically. Just as he was about to withdraw his gaze, he felt an unusual gaze. Then, he looked at Yun Maozhe's unfriendly gaze on the other side of Wu Ju. He revealed a pondering look. He could roughly guess why Yun Maozhe was hostile towards him. After Wu Ju arrived, the other 5 palace masters cupped their hands and greeted him. Wu Ju nodded and glanced at Zhuowen, but he did not say anything. "The 5 of you, I changed the rules of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake without permission. The 5 of you won't have any objections, right?" Wu Ju said calmly. Although Wu Ju's words were for discussion, his tone was unquestionable. "As long as it is a decision made by Palace Master Wu Ju, we will naturally not have any objections." Xiang Lan, the Palace Master of Xiang Desire Palace, said with a smile. The other Palace Masters also cupped their hands in acknowledgement. Although Palace Master Jing Yun was a little dissatisfied, the current situation was irresistible, so she couldn't say anything. She only gave Zhuowen an apologetic look. Zhuowen smiled faintly, indicating that Palace Master Jing Yun did not need to take it to heart. "Since no one has any objections, I will cut to the chase. In the future, the qualifications to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake will be the same. Regardless of whether it is a disciple of the Six Desires Palace, an elder or a palace master, if you want to enter, you will have to pass a test," Wu Ju said faintly. "Palace Master Wu Ju, what is this test?" Palace Master Jing Yun could not help but ask. Wu Ju smiled and waved his sleeve. A slender figure slowly walked out from the dark door of the palace. This slender figure was graceful and graceful. Just by looking at her figure, one could tell that this woman was definitely a beautiful woman. It was a pity that this woman was not wearing a luxurious dress. Instead, she was wearing an old hemp garment. She was barefooted as she slowly walked out. The moment this woman finally appeared in front of everyone, the square suddenly quieted down. There were even some disciples who revealed a look of horror. Even Zhuowen frowned when he saw this woman who appeared from the door of the palace. He revealed a trace of horror. This woman in hemp garment had a slender figure and a perfect body. However, she did not have a face. Her face did not have any facial features. She did not have eyes, nose, mouth or ears. She did not even have hair. Of course, if one looked carefully, this woman's eyes and mouth were sewn together with thin thread. Her nose and ears were cut off. However, the treatment was too seamless. Hence, at first glance, she looked like a faceless person. The moment Zhuowen saw this woman, a burst of anger appeared in his chest. Although he did not know this woman, it was too cruel to treat a woman like this. "Palace Master Jing Yun, how can your Six Desires Palace be so cruel to torture a woman like this?" Zhuowen questioned Palace Master Jing Yun coldly. Palace Master Jing Yun frowned slightly. Before she could speak, Yuan He, who was behind her, retorted, "What an ignorant guy. You don't even know who this person is and you dare to question the Palace Master. What right do you have to question the Palace Master? Let me tell you, this woman is a desireless one. In order to cultivate the desireless cultivation method of the Six Desires Palace, she cut off the feeling of 6 desires on her own in order to cultivate the desireless cultivation method to great success. You are really capable to use this to accuse the Palace Master." Yuan He jabbered on endlessly, ridiculing Zhuowen from top to bottom. Originally, Yuan He was already very unhappy that Zhuowen had snatched a spot in the Desire Palace. Now that she had the opportunity, she naturally would not let Zhuan go. Yuan He, that's enough. This is Longwen's first time in the Six Desires Palace, so it's reasonable that he doesn't know this. After Palace Master Jing Yun spoke, the chattering Yuan He could only shut up helplessly. However, she looked at Zhuan with eyes full of dissatisfaction. Yuan could not be bothered with Yuan He. Instead, he looked at Palace Master Jing Yun as if he was waiting for her explanation. Palace Master Jing Yun nodded at Zhuan and said, Yuan He is right. She is indeed the second desireless one in countless years in the Six Desires Palace. She also cultivates the supreme cultivation method of the Six Desires Palace, the desireless cultivation method. What is her name? Why is she the second? From what you said, the desireless cultivation method is very powerful. Why don't the other cultivators of the Six Desires Palace cultivate this cultivation method? Zhuowen's expression softened as he asked curiously. You can also see that the cultivation method of the Six Desires Palace is divided according to the 6 desires of the 7 emotions and 6 desires of the mortal world. For example, the cultivation method of the Desire Palace must be cut off from the desires before starting to cultivate. The same is true for the other 5 palaces. Among them, the cultivation method of the Desire Palace is the most powerful. Palace Master Jing Yun sighed softly and said, in fact, our Six Desires Palace has another cultivation method. This cultivation method is above the cultivation method of the other 6 palaces. It is the desireless cultivation method. The first-generation ancestor who founded the Six Desires Palace cultivated the desireless cultivation method and became a desireless one. He finally succeeded in reaching the Tao realm and later left the 8 heavens. Palace Master Jing Yun didn't say the following words. Zhuan didn't need to think to know that the first-generation Palace Master of the Six Desires Palace should have gone to the 9th heaven. Chapter 2444. Six Desires Hell. Your Six Desires Palace has been established for such a long time, yet this is the second desireless person to appear. Could it be that none of you can practice the desireless cultivation technique? Zhuan asked doubtfully. Palace Master Jing Yun said in a self-deprecating manner, Longwen, you might not know this, but the requirements to practice the desireless cultivation technique are very high. Many past palace masters have tried to practice the desireless cultivation technique, but after they severed their 5 senses, they died before they could even reach the entry level of the desireless cultivation technique. No one has ever succeeded in becoming a desireless person. You should know that if you want to become a desireless person, you must be able to practice the desireless cultivation technique. Otherwise, you'll be a cripple. In addition, not everyone has the courage to sever their 5 senses, because that's really no different from being a cripple. Hearing this, Zhuowen's expression changed. Palace Master Jing Yun was right. How frightening was it to lose one's 5 senses? Without sight, hearing, touch, taste, and smell, one would lose any joy of being a human. It was very frightening. Zhuan only had to think about it to know how lonely that feeling was. Thinking of this, Zhuan looked at desireless person with admiration. This person was willing to become a desireless person, so he must be a person with a firm will. What's the name of this desireless person? Zhuowen suddenly asked. She's called Wang Yan, and she was brought here by Palace Master Wujue. Speaking of which, this desireless person hasn't been in the Six Desires Palace for a long time, but he directly practiced the desireless cultivation technique. I really admire this, Palace Master Jing Yun said in admiration. Zhuowen nodded, but didn't ask much. Although he was shocked by this desireless person in the beginning, he felt much more at ease after hearing Palace Master Jing Yun's explanation. Palace Master Wujue, is the test related to desireless person? Palace Master Xianglan asked doubtfully. Palace Master Wujue said with a smile, yes, desireless person can summon the 6 desires hell. As long as he can persist in the 6 desires hell for half an incense stick's time, he will obtain the qualifications to enter the 6 desires heavenly lake. He can actually summon the 6 desires hell? This desireless person's cultivation speed is really fast. Palace Master Jing Yun said with her beautiful eyes narrowed. Zhuan looked at Palace Master Jing Yun in confusion and asked, What is the Six Desires Hell? Palace Lord Jingyun calmed down and explained, the Hell of Six Desires is a hell that deprives you of your six desires. Once you enter this hell, your six desires will be slowly stripped away. Moreover, the pain of deprivation is very real. This kind of pain isn't physical, it's on the level of the soul. This kind of pain is very difficult for ordinary people to endure. Not only Palace Master Jingyun, but the other palace masters were also shocked, and their faces turned ugly. If the 5 palace masters don't have any objections, I'll have Desireless summon the Six Desires Hell now. Although Palace Master Wujue still used the same inquiring tone, she didn't wait for the 5 palace masters to answer and formed a seal. The body of Desireless, who had walked out, trembled. Immediately after, he let out a sharp howl and extended his right hand. Kneeling on one knee, he slapped the ground with his right hand. Soon after, Un felt a terrifying and unknown power gushing out from the depths of the ground. Soon after, he noticed a shadow rising from the ground. This shadow had 6 steps. At the bottom of the steps, raging black flames were burning. There were also countless figures swaying and struggling unceasingly. It was as if the bottom of the steps was an endless and terrifying hell. This time, the 12 people who intend to enter the Six Desires Heavenly Lake must stay on the steps for half the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Alright, I have to remind you that the higher you go on the steps, the more painful it will be. It's best to act according to your capabilities. Palace Master Wujue said indifferently. Zhuan's expression changed. He understood Palace Master Wujue's meaning. Her requirement was that they just had to stay on the steps for half the time it takes for an incense stick to burn, no matter which step they were on. Moreover, with Palace Master Wujue's reminder, the rest of the people would definitely stay on the last step. However, from Zhuan's point of view, each step could only accommodate 2 people. In other words, only 2 people could stand on the last step. The rest of the people would be forced to enter the next step. Zhuan knew that the 12 people would definitely have to fight in order to obtain the best position. However, Palace Master Wujue had already planned for this. The eyes of the 12 disciples standing behind their respective palace masters flickered. Clearly, they had guessed the hidden condition of Palace Master Wujue. Clearly, it wasn't as simple as staying on the steps for half the time it takes for an incense stick to burn. Let's start now. Those who seize the first opportunity will have more opportunities. As for these opportunities, you will have to fight for them yourselves. After Palace Master Wujue finished speaking, the 11 disciples standing behind the 6 great palace masters flew out and stepped onto the steps. Only Zhuan was still standing behind Palace Master Jingyun, not moving in the slightest. The other disciples surrounding the plaza immediately became noisy. They were all cheering for their senior brothers and sisters from their respective palaces. Look, did that brat from the Desire Palace turn stupid? He's actually not moving at all. Is he so scared that he can't even walk? Don't talk nonsense. That's not a disciple of the Desire Palace. It said that he's an outsider. I don't know how he got in through the back door of the Desire Palace, but he got Palace Master Jingyun to get him a place in the test. TSK, he's actually an opportunistic guy. He doesn't have the ability, but he still needs to rely on connections to make a fool of himself. Zhuan, who was standing motionlessly beside Palace Master Jingyun, immediately attracted the attention of many disciples around him. Following that, a series of mocking voices could be heard. As for those disciples who originally wanted to cheer for the Desire Palace, they all lowered their heads in shame. They felt that letting Zhuan take the test on behalf of the Desire Palace was simply a disgrace. They also had no face to cheer for him. Longwen, you're not going to make a move? Palace Master Jingyun was surprised to see Zhuan not moving. Zhuan, however, said calmly, I'm really not interested in the fight between a group of juniors. I'll go up after they're done fighting. When Palace Master Jingyun heard this, she was a little speechless. She thought to herself, you're not that old, right? You actually called Yao Xiangjuan and the others juniors. With Palace Master Jingyun's cultivation and realm, she could naturally see that Zhuan's bone age was not that old. He was even younger than any of the disciples present. It could be seen that this child's talent was too strong. However, Palace Master Jing Yun was very clear about Zhuowen's strength. If Zhuowen rushed up now, none of the other 11 people would be a match for him. Even Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe, who were the most favored, would not be a match for him. After all, in the eyes of Palace Master Jing Yun, Yun was an abnormal person who had defeated the Rakshasa king. Palace Master Jing Yun, why is your candidate not moving at all? Is he afraid? Palace Master Fei Shan, who was closest to Palace Master Jing Yun, looked at Zhuowen, who was standing behind Palace Master Jing Yun with ill intentions, and said mockingly. Chapter 2445. Coward Palace Master Jing Yun couldn't be bothered with the doubts of the other palace masters. She stood there calmly and didn't urge Zhuowen, nor did she say anything. The other palace masters didn't say anything after being snubbed, but there was a mocking smile on their faces. Obviously, they despised the cowardly behavior of Long Wen, who was chosen by Palace Master Jing Yun. Palace Master Wu Ju glanced at Zhuowen indifferently and didn't say anything. Instead, she turned to look at the situation on the Hell of Six Desires. At this moment, Yun Maozhe was the first to reach the stairs. He was the first to land on the first step. The aura on his body suddenly erupted. Obviously, he was showing off to the others. The other 10 people knew Yun Maozhe's strength. Therefore, when Yun Maozhe reached the first step, they consciously avoided him. Yao Xiangjuan's strength wasn't any weaker than Yun Maozhe's. However, in order to take care of Zhu Rui, she fell behind. Zhu Rui looked at Yao Xiangjuan anxiously and hurriedly said, "Senior sister, don't worry about me. Otherwise, you won't have any good spots to choose from later." Yao Xiangjuan shook her head and said, "Junior sister Zhu, although I don't know why your palace master wants you to participate in this test, if you rely on yourself, you won't be able to pass this test. In any case, we've gone through life and death together. Since you're with me, I naturally won't ignore you." Zhu Rui was touched and ashamed. She could only let Yao Xiangjuan lead her. The two women quickly reached the stairs of the Hell of Six Desires. Their speed wasn't fast. When they reached the stairs, there were already 4 people in front of them. Yun Maozhe naturally occupied the first step. He didn't even allow the other 3 to fight for the other half of the first step. He was extremely domineering. Although the other 3 were angry, they didn't attack Yun Maozhe. They knew very well that Yun Maozhe wasn't easy to deal with. Therefore, the 3 of them took a step back and fought for the 2 spots on the second step. Jun was no stranger to these 3 people. They were Tan Kai from the Palace of Desire, Qi Lan from the Palace of Desire, and Yuan He from the Palace of Desire. The battle between the 3 of them was extremely intense. None of them were willing to back down. When Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui arrived in front of the stairs, Yun Maozhe smiled at Yao Xiangjuan and said, "Junior sister Yao, I've already reserved this spot for you. You don't need to compete with them to avoid dirtying your hands." Yao Xiangjuan's long, shapely eyebrows slightly knitted as she looked at Yun Maozhe, whose gaze was blazing. She cupped her fists and said, "Xiangjuan appreciates senior martial brother Yun's good intentions, but junior martial sister Zhu Rui and I need 2 spots, so senior martial brother Yun won't leave any for me." After saying that, Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui brushed past Yun Maozhe and headed for the 3rd platform. In the end, they occupied the 3rd platform. Since the 12 of them had not chosen their positions, the power of the Hell of Six Desires had not been fully released. Therefore, the people on the stairs did not feel the power that deprived them of their 6 desires. Yun Maozhe's face was gloomy. When he saw Yao Xiangjuan and Zhu Rui brushing past him, an inexplicable anger rose in his heart. However, he forcibly suppressed this anger. His unfriendly gaze fell on Zhuowen, who was not far away, who was still motionless. "He's just a coward," Yun Maozhe said without the slightest hesitation. Although Yun Maozhe's words were without rhyme or reason, many people present knew that the person Yun Maozhe was talking about was none other than the white-clothed youth standing behind Palace Master Jing Yun. Zhuowen glanced at Yun Maozhe indifferently. In his heart, he drew a big cross for this guy. When he made his move later, he did not intend to show mercy to this guy. Bang! A miserable-looking figure fell from the 2nd step outside. Everyone focused their eyes and realized that this miserable-looking figure was actually Yuan He from the Desire Palace. On the 2nd platform, Tan Kai and Qi Lan looked down indifferently at the severely injured Yuan He. Soon after, they sat down cross-legged on the second platform, no longer paying attention to Yuan He, who looked dejected. The moment Yuan He was struck down, the fourth and fifth platforms were also snatched away by other disciples. In the end, only the sixth platform and the first platform beside Yun Maozhe were left. Yuan He's beautiful eyes were filled with dejection. She knew very well that her injuries were not light. She was probably no match for any one of the 10 people on the steps right now. Trying to snatch it from them was just asking to be humiliated. However, Yuan He was unwilling to go to the sixth platform just like that. She knew that the sixth platform was the closest to the Hell of Six Desires. When the Hell of Six Desires was activated, she would definitely be the first to bear the brunt. On the sixth platform, there was no need for half an incense stick to burn. Yuan He even thought that she would not be able to last 15 minutes. When she thought of this, Yuan He's beautiful eyes fell on Yun Maozhe, who was on the first platform. She gritted her teeth and walked over to Yun Maozhe. She cupped her hands in a rather humble manner and said, "Senior brother Yun, your position is also empty. Can you give it to me?" Yun Maozhe glanced at Yuan He and smiled faintly. "Junior sister Yuan He, you're too courteous. If you want this position, what's wrong with giving it to you? It's just that I can't stand the other participant of the Palace of Desire. That fellow is standing there like an idiot. Do you think it's fair for you to fight here alone?" Yuan He's expression was slightly unsightly. She glanced at Jun, who was still motionless behind her, and snorted coldly, "This person is an extremely cowardly coward. It's simply a waste for my palace master to give a spot to him. I don't expect this person to help me in any way." Yun Maozhe smiled faintly and said, "Junior sister Yuan He, actually, this coward is not completely useless. Ask him to get his ass over here. As long as he kneels before me and begs me to give up this position, I'll immediately give it to you. What do you think?" Yuan He was stunned. Then she cupped her fists and said rather happily, "Then, thank you very much, senior brother Yun." After saying that, Yuan He rushed over to Zhuowen's side. In Yuan He's opinion, this boy did not even dare to fight for a position, so he was definitely a complete coward. Asking this coward to kneel before Yun Maozhe and beg for a position, this request was not excessive. And this coward could also be considered to have contributed to the Palace of Desire, so why not? So in Yuan He's heart, she felt that Zhuowen would definitely accept this proposal. Zhuowen had long heard the conversation between Yuan He and Yun Maozhe. He sneered repeatedly in his heart. But when Yuan He came before him, he still asked knowingly, "Senior sister Yuan He, why didn't you go and snatch it? Why did you come back again? Do you want to be a coward like me?" Yuan He's face froze, revealing an angry look, and she snorted coldly, "Do you think I'm you? What a good-for-nothing fellow. Now, I'll give you a chance to redeem yourself. Now, go over and kneel before Yun Maozhe and beg for a position by his side. You just have to do that." Palace Master Jing Yun stood on the spot and did not stop her. She was clear that Jun had his own sense of propriety when dealing with matters, and there was no need for her to worry. Instead, Yuan He's performance disappointed her slightly, but she did not point it out. "All right, I'll go over right now." Out of Yuan He's expectations, Zhuowen agreed very readily, and then he brushed past Yuan He and walked over. Chapter 2446. Yun Maozhe was furious. Although the conversation between Zhuowen and Yuan He wasn't loud, it wasn't soft either. At least, all the disciples in the square heard it. Soon after, the disciples in the plaza roared with laughter as they looked mockingly at Zhuowen, who had finally taken a step forward. The rest of the palace masters also had strange looks on their faces as they looked at the indifferent palace master Jing Yun in confusion. They were also flabbergasted. Why would Palace Master Jing Yun give a precious spot to this foreign cultivator in front of them? They could naturally detect the aura on Zhuowen's body. He was at the peak of the Void Sky 7th step. This kind of cultivation wasn't weak, and there was a gap between him and the great disciples of the Six Palaces. Of course, in their opinion, even if there was a gap, there was no need to be a coward. Therefore, they looked down on Zhuowen. Yuan He looked at Zhuowen's back and was stunned at first. Then he sneered and followed. On the stairs above the Six Desires Hell, the 10 disciples who had chosen their seats looked at Zhuan with different expressions. Among the 10 people except for Tan Kai, Qi Lan, Yao Xiangjuan, and Zhu Ru, who looked serious and strange, the others looked disdainful and contemptuous. Zhuan's behavior just now had already made them think of him as a coward. The smile on Yun Maoji's face grew wider and wider, and the disdain in his eyes grew stronger. Tan Kai, who was sitting one step behind Yun Maoji, sneered in his heart and thought to himself, "This Yun Maoji really thinks that he's invincible among the younger generation. He's going to suffer soon." Not long ago, Tan Kai suffered a great loss at Zhuowen's hands. This made him realize how terrifying this white-clothed youth's strength was. Yun Maoji was one of the 2 strongest disciples of the Six Desires Palace. His cultivation was around the peak of the Void Sky 8th step, and he looked down on all the younger disciples of the Six Desires Palace. Tan Kai knew that Yun Maoji was very strong, but after being defeated by Zhuan, he changed his mind. He had personally experienced the despair he felt when facing Zhuan. It was much stronger than Yun Maoji's. The reason why he had such a feeling was because he knew that the white-clothed youth in front of him was much stronger than him. He had already surpassed Yun Maoji. Qi Lan and Yun Maoji had similar thoughts. After all, Yun had casually defeated Tan Kai in her garden. He was even more clear than Tan Kai about how formidable and terrifying Zhuan was. Zhuan stopped more than 10 meters away from Yun Maoji and looked at him silently. "I've heard Palace Lord Jing Yun mention you before. You're called Longwen, right? I say, Longwen, look at your senior sister from the Desire Palace. She didn't even manage to grab a spot. You are also a member of the Desire Palace for the time being. Shouldn't you help your senior sister?" The mocking smile on Yun Maoji's lips deepened as he continued, "There's one more seat beside me. Even if it's empty, it's still empty. It's not impossible to give it up. If you kneel down and beg me, this seat will belong to your Desire Palace. You or your senior sister can sit here as you please." Zhuan looked at Yun Maoji silently. He knew that the reason why the latter targeted him from the beginning was probably because of Yao Xiangjuan. Zhuan felt a familiar gaze fall on him. He immediately raised his head and saw Yao Xiangjuan sitting on the 3rd step looking at him apologetically. Zhuan smiled slightly, indicating that the latter didn't need to care. This small detail between Zhuan and Yao Xiangjuan was naturally caught by the sensitive Yun Maoji. Jealousy burned in his heart, but he didn't show it on his face. "Longwen, what are you still standing there for? Why don't you do as senior brother Yun says? Do you want me to invite you?" Behind him, Yuan He's unfriendly voice sounded. His tone was full of urging and disdain. Zhuan ignored Yuan He's urging behind him. Instead, he looked at Yun Maoji indifferently and said with a smile, "Senior brother Yun, there are 2 of us here. I'm afraid 1 seat isn't enough, right?" Yun Maoji was taken aback. Soon after, he sneered and said, "You still want 2 seats?" Yuan He came to Zhuowen's side first and said coldly, "Longwen, why would a coward like you need a seat? If you also want one, go to the 6th step. There's another seat there." "I prefer this 1st step, so I don't plan to go to the 6th step," Zhuowen said indifferently. Yun Maoji's face darkened. He sneered and said, "You mean you plan to snatch my seat?" "That's right. If senior brother Yun doesn't want to get hurt, you should give up this seat. Otherwise, you'll be embarrassed later," Zhuowen said as if nothing had happened. Yuan He was stunned on the spot. Zhuowen, who was only a coward in her eyes, actually said such gutsy words at this moment. She couldn't react for a moment. "Ha, what a joke." Yun Maoji grinned. In his heart, he felt that Zhuowen was definitely courting death. Just as he was about to open his mouth to refute, a gust of wind suddenly swept over. The terrifying power caused Yun Maoji's pupils to shrink. Bang! Yun Maoji punched out without thinking. The terrifying fist wind spread out like a storm. Then he groaned and retreated from the 1st step, landing below. The moment Yun Maoji landed, a figure brushed past him and stood where Yun Maoji was just now. "Senior brother Yun, you're too polite. Since you've given up this seat, I won't be polite." An indifferent voice slowly sounded, finally breaking the surrounding silence. Yun Maozhe looked at his trembling right fist, then looked in shock at the white-clothed youth who was already standing on the first step. His eyes were filled with disbelief. Just now, it was this white-clothed youth who attacked with a palm, and he casually punched out. The two of them exchanged a blow, and he was blasted out. Yun Maozhe could still feel the intense pain coming from his right fist. At this moment, Yun Maozhe was really shocked. How could a guy who he thought was just a coward have such powerful strength when he made a move? Although he didn't use his full strength just now to be able to injure him, this person was definitely not simple. Yuan He's beautiful eyes were stunned. She looked at Zhuowen, who was already standing on the first step, and then looked at Yun Maozhe, who was blasted off the step by Zhuowen. For a moment, her mind couldn't wrap itself around the situation. The surrounding disciples were also stunned. Evidently, this sudden turn of events had caught them off guard. The 6 palace masters were more or less surprised. Among them, Palace Master Wu Jue looked at the calm and composed Palace Master Jing Yun, and a thoughtful look appeared in her beautiful eyes. Bastard, I don't know what kind of despicable method he used. It seems that I have to get serious. Yun Maozhe was shocked and could only raise his long spear to block this terrifying big hand. Puchi! Yun Maozhe spat out a mouthful of blood. Then, he fell out of the clouds in an extremely sorry state and heavily smashed onto the ground. Outside, the onlooking disciples basically couldn't see the battle that happened in the clouds. However, the moment Yun Maozhe was blasted out of the clouds, he immediately attracted the attention of many people. When they discovered that this sorry figure was actually Yun Maozhe, they all fell silent. Yuan He took a few steps back and looked at this scene in disbelief. She was not a fool. Now, she finally knew that this Yun was not a coward. Instead, he was an expert that even Yun Maozhe was not a match for. As for why this Yun had not moved before, she had also guessed the reason. Most likely, in his eyes, they, the eldest disciples, were simply not enough, so he disdained to compete with them. The clouds dispersed, and a white figure stood motionless on the first step like a mountain. It seemed that he did not move at all. Obviously, in the battle just now, Yun Maozhe could not even make this person move a step. As long as one was not a fool, one would know how big the gap between Yun Maozhe and this person was. At this moment, the onlooking disciples did not dare to doubt the strength of this white-clothed youth. Even Yun Maozhe was easily defeated by him. Was there still a need to doubt this kind of strength? Yuan He's beautiful eyes flickered. She glanced at the white-clothed youth standing on the first step like a boulder, and her beautiful eyes were filled with a complicated and guilty expression. It was laughable that she had previously mocked this person as a coward. Now, she was ruthlessly slapped in the face by this battle. She glanced at the position beside Zhuowen and hesitated for a moment. In the end, she still opened her mouth and said, "Senior Brother Long, the position beside you." Zhuowen smiled slightly and said, "Senior Sister Yuan He, you and I are both representatives of the Desire Palace. This position is for you." When Yuan He saw the smile on Zhuowen's face, the guilt on her face became even more intense. She even stuttered when she spoke. She walked to the position beside Zhuowen and lowered her head. She did not dare to look at Zhuowen as she softly said, "Thank you, Senior Brother Long." Zhuowen only smiled. Previously, Yuan He's performance had indeed made him loathe the latter. However, this position was given to him by Palace Master Jing Yun. Now that he had already snatched 2 positions, he naturally had to give them to Yuan He. Otherwise, Palace Master Jing Yun would lose face. After a long while, Yun Maozhe finally stood up. His face was pale, but the resentment in his eyes was even more intense. He glanced at Zhuowen, and without saying a word, he chose the last remaining position on the 6th step. Palace Master Wu Ju did not show any favoritism. After the 12 people had chosen their positions, she once again gave Desireless an order. Soon after, Desireless finally released the might of the 6 desires hell. Bang! In an instant, the hellfire at the bottom of the steps was like the mouth of a ferocious beast. It fiercely rushed up and enveloped all 12 people on the steps. If one were to observe carefully, the 6th step was the closest to the bottom. Therefore, it was the place that came into contact with the hellfire the most. It was also the place that was the most torturous. Yun Maozhe once again spat out a mouthful of blood, and his face became even paler. He had already suffered serious injuries. Now that he was hit by the hellfire, his injuries were naturally worsened. Zhuan frowned slightly. When the hellfire arrived, he didn't feel the scorching heat that flames should have. Instead, he felt an extreme chill. The instant this chill invaded his body, he clearly felt his 5 senses being gradually stripped away. The pain of having his 5 senses stripped away caused even Zhuan to break out in cold sweat. This pain was much more intense than being skinned alive. Zhuan thought that this was merely the first step. If it was the 6th step, the pain would be several times more intense. Just as Zhuan was thinking about this, his divine sense sensed that Yun Maozhe and another disciple on the 6th step had already let out miserable cries. Those cries would cause one's hair to stand on end. The disciple standing beside Yun Maozhe only lasted for 10 breaths of time before fainting. His entire body twitched and white foam came out of his mouth. Fortunately, the instant that disciple fainted, Palace Master Wuju used her divine power to pull him out. On the other hand, although Yun Maozhe's cries were very miserable, he was still barely able to endure. Time slowly passed. Of the 12 people on the 6 Desires Hell, only 6 remained. They were Zhuan, Yuan He, Qi Lan, Tan Kai, Yao Xiangjuan, and Yun Maozhe. At this moment, only half of the time had passed. Chapter 2448. Pass the test. Plot. Yuan He, who was sitting cross-legged beside Zhuan, suddenly fell to the ground and fainted. Yun didn't have the time to pay attention to Yuan He. Instead, he silently endured the pain of his 5 senses being stripped away. This kind of pain wasn't instantaneous. Instead, it gradually deepened. It was like a skinner. He didn't peel off your skin all at once. Instead, he slowly separated your skin from your flesh bit by bit. This kind of pain was continuous. Moreover, it became more and more painful. Yuan He was pulled out by Wu Jue. At this moment, there were only 5 people left on the platform. After an hour had passed, the remaining 5 people had all persevered. After Palace Master Wu Jue withdrew the Hell of 6 Desires, Yun Maozhe, who was sitting on the 6th platform, immediately fell to the ground and actually fainted. As for Qi Lan and Tan Kai, although they didn't faint, they fell into a state of unconsciousness. In fact, they weren't far from fainting. Yao Xiangjuan's performance was extremely good. Although her face was pale, her consciousness was extremely clear. She opened her eyes and looked around in confusion. Zhuan slowly opened his eyes. His condition was the best. His vitality was much better than Yao Xiangjuan's. It was as if he wasn't affected by the Hell of 6 Desires at all. The 6 palace masters glanced at Zhuan at the same time. Obviously, Zhuan's performance was beyond their expectations. Congratulations to the 5 of you for obtaining the qualifications to enter the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. In 3 days I will open the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. I hope that you won't be late. After Palace Master Wu Jue finished speaking, she grabbed Yun Maozhe and slowly entered the Palace of Desire. As for Desireless, he was like a walking corpse as he followed behind Palace Master Wu Jue. Yao Xiangjuan stood up and smiled at Zhuan. Senior Brother Long, congratulations. Zhuan cupped his hands and returned the greeting. The main reason I have this opportunity is because of Miss Yao and Palace Master Jing Yun. I still have to thank you. Speaking up to here, Zhuan looked at Yao Xiangjuan in astonishment and said, Miss Yao, it seems that your willpower is really strong. It seems that you haven't been affected too much. At this point, Zhuan couldn't help but glance at Qi Lan and Tan Kai, who were in an unconscious state. These 2 fellows were sitting on the 2nd step, while Yao Xiangjuan was sitting on the 3rd step. In terms of geographical position, Yao Xiangjuan was slightly inferior to these 2, but the impact on Yao Xiangjuan was actually smaller. As for Qi Lan and Tan Kai, they almost fainted. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes revealed a touch of imperceptible sadness as she whispered, Maybe I'm used to it? Are you used to it? Zhuan asked with a frown. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes were a little panicked, as if she had said something wrong. She hesitated but did not continue to speak. Zhuan was puzzled, but he smiled and said, I was a little impulsive on this matter. I shouldn't have casually asked. Zhuan knew that Yao Xiangjuan must have her own secret to be able to pass through the six desires hell so easily. Wasn't he, Zhuan, the same? If it wasn't for his divine sense being abnormally strong, he wouldn't have been able to pass through the six desires hell so easily. Yao Xiangjuan looked at Zhuan with a trace of gratitude in her eyes. Senior brother Long, I'll go back first. We'll meet again in 3 days. Yao Xiangjuan finished speaking and entered the Palace of Desire. At this moment, the other palace masters also left with their respective disciples. Senior brother Long, I had eyes but failed to recognize Mount Tai before. Please forgive me. After sending Yao Xiangjuan off, Yuan He came in front of Zhuan and lowered her head to Zhuan with a guilty look. Zhuan looked at Palace Master Jing Yun behind Yuan He. He knew that Yuan He came to apologize under the instructions of Palace Master Jing Yun. Moreover, Yuan He was unconscious before, but now he was awake. It should be Palace Master Jing Yun who came. Senior sister Yuan He is too polite. It's just a small matter, what's there to mention? Zhuan said with a smile. Yuan He let out a light breath and immediately said, Senior brother Long, your cultivation is high. It's not appropriate to call me senior sister. Just call me junior sister Yuan He. But Zhuan nodded. Long when Yuan He, let's go. The six desires heavenly lake will open in 3 days. It's useless to stay here now. Palace Master Jing Yun's voice sounded. 3 days later, Palace Master Jing Yun once again brought Chuan to the square outside the Palace of Desire. At this moment, Palace Master Xiang Lan and Palace Master Hua Ting had already arrived in the square. They brought Tan Kai and Qi Lan respectively. Tan Kai glanced at Zhuan, his eyes full of fear, but he didn't say a word. On the other hand, Qi Lan gave Zhuan a friendly smile, and Zhuan also returned a smile. Palace Master Hua Ting saw Qi Lan's small action and couldn't help but ask softly, Qi Lan, you know this long one? Qi Lan respectfully said, Palace Master, I only met senior brother Long a few times. I also met him in the garden. After chatting, I found that senior brother Long is a good person. Hua Ting nodded as if she was muttering to herself, I heard from Jing Yun that this Long one seems to be a rogue cultivator. Moreover, he's not that old. It's really commendable for him to have such strength. Qi Lan's beautiful eyes revealed a strange color. Although she knew that Zhuan was very strong, she really didn't know that Zhuan was actually a rogue cultivator. She always thought that Zhuan must have a very strong force behind him. That's why Zhuan could have such powerful strength. She didn't expect that he was just a rogue cultivator. Qi Lan looked at Zhuan with even more reverence. For a rogue cultivator to be able to cultivate to such a level, what kind of perseverance and opportunity did it require? At least, Qi Lan knew that she definitely couldn't do it. Zhuan naturally didn't know about the conversation between Qi Lan and Hua Ting. He also didn't know that Qi Lan inexplicably gave him a good person card. Now, he was looking forward to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Zhuan was very clear that as long as his original body's cultivation could use the Six Desires Heavenly Lake to enter the 8 steps Void Sky, then his original body's strength alone would have a qualitative change. At that time, his divine ability, Waning Sun in the Sea, would have no restrictions. At that time, his strength would be comparable to the Life Enlightening Realm. It could be said that the Six Desires Heavenly Lake this time had a crucial effect on his advancement. Therefore, he couldn't help but be excited. Just as Zhuan was deep in thought, the door of Desire Palace opened. Palace Master Wu Ju brought Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe out. 3 Palace Masters, you also know the location of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Now, follow me. The moment Palace Master Wu Ju came out, he took out a sparkling and translucent flying divine tool and brought Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe up. Zhuan also noticed that Desireless was already on the flying divine tool. He thought in his heart, could it be that Desireless is also going to follow me? Palace Master Jing Yun brought Zhuan and followed the other 2 Palace Masters into the flying divine tool. Chapter 2449. 6 Desires Poison. Yun Maozhe's gaze was ignored by Zhuan. Right now, he was looking forward to entering the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Palace Master Wujue's flying divine tool was extremely fast. After a short while, it stopped at a barren land in the northern part of the Six Desires star field. It's here. Let's all go down. As soon as Palace Master Wujue finished speaking, she waved her sleeve and everyone on the flying divine tool involuntarily left. Then, Palace Master Wujue naturally put away the flying divine tool. Zhuan looked at Palace Master Wujue in shock. Just now, when Palace Master Wujue pushed them out of the flying divine tool, Zhuan didn't even feel it. Clearly, Palace Master Wujue's strength was much stronger than his. Palace Master Jingyun was already strong enough, but she was still casually pushed out by Palace Master Wujue. One could see how terrifying Palace Master Wujue was. Zhuan couldn't help but think of the terrifying protection Yao Xiangjuan had triggered in the Divine Pill's secret realm by Luosha King. That protection was set up on Yao Xiangjuan's body by the dual extremities of life and death. Zhuan knew that the protection should have been set up by Palace Master Wujue. Clearly, Palace Master Wujue was a genuine dual extremities of life and death expert. Palace Master Wujue's personality was clearly cold. He treated everyone and everything with an ice-cold appearance. Moreover, he was extremely domineering. Zhuan wasn't used to Palace Master Wujue's domineering attitude. However, Palace Master Jingyun and the others looked calm. Clearly, they were used to Palace Master Wujue's style. Palace Master Wujue landed on the barren land in front of him. This barren land was formed by countless dim stars. Zhuan looked at these stars and knew that they were on the verge of collapse. Palace Master Wujue formed a seal with both hands. Then, the countless stars in this barren land began to move. Zhuan looked at 1,000 miles in front of Palace Master Wujue. He saw a black whirlpool there. Those stars were constantly moving because of the whirlpool's power. The surrounding stars were all sucked into the black vortex. Then, the vortex suddenly exploded, and a dazzling light flashed. Zhuan could not help but close his eyes. When he opened his eyes again, he found that the wilderness in front of him had turned into a huge pool. The water in the pool was not clear and transparent. Instead, it was colorful, as if it was made up of all kinds of pigments. This is the Six Desires Heavenly Lake? Zhuan could not help but ask in a low voice. Palace Master Jingyun nodded and said, "This is the Six Desires Heavenly Lake." Right now, Palace Master Wujue has already opened the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Later on, listen to Palace Master Wujue's instructions. Do not go in without permission. Can't I go in by myself now? Zhuan asked doubtfully. Yes, the Six Desires Heavenly Lake is extremely safe. However, do you see the black substance around the Six Desires Heavenly Lake? That black substance is extremely poisonous. Moreover, it is a poison that targets the depths of the soul. If you are contaminated by this black substance, it will be very troublesome. Palace Master Jingyun patiently explained. After Palace Master Jingyun's reminder, Zhuan finally noticed that the Six Desires Heavenly Lake was indeed surrounded by a black substance. Because this black substance was too close to the darkness of the starry sky, he did not notice it for a while. The Six Desires Heavenly Lake is surrounded by the Six Desires poison. It is a terrifying poison that targets the soul. If desireless does not bring you in, you will not be able to enter. Also, this Six Desires Heavenly Lake exists in another space. Right now, this is only a projection. However, this projection has a teleportation function. Only by entering this projection can you be teleported into the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Palace Master Wujue looked around and introduced indifferently. Finally, her gaze fell on Zhuan. Zhuan's heart tightened. This Palace Master Wujue was an expert at the two extremities of life and death. She was many times stronger than him. Being stared at by her, Zhuan felt as if his entire body was being seen through. Fortunately, Palace Master Wujue's gaze did not linger on Zhuan for too long. Instead, she naturally shifted her gaze away. Zhuan also knew that Palace Master Wujue's words were meant for him. Yao Xiangjuan and the others were disciples of the Six Desires Palace. They definitely knew the things to pay attention to when entering the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Only Zhuan was completely unaware. You can enter. Just follow behind Desireless. Also, I must remind you that you only have a month's time in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. After a month, you will be automatically teleported out. After Palace Master Wu Ju finished speaking, she clasped her hands behind her back and no longer spoke. As for Desireless, he stepped out from behind Palace Master Wu Ju and slowly walked towards the Six Desires Heavenly Lake's projection. Yun Maozhe, Tan Kai, and Qi Lan hurriedly followed behind him. As for Yao Xiangjuan, she came to Zhuowen's side and said, "Big brother Long, let's follow him." Zhuowen knew that Yao Xiangjuan wanted to take care of him. After all, he knew nothing about the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Zhuowen did not refuse. He nodded his head and walked alongside Yao Xiangjuan. When Yun Maozhe saw this scene, the resentment in his eyes became even more intense. However, he was powerless in his heart. This Yun was too strong. He was simply not a match for him. Moreover, Palace Master Wu Ju would definitely not agree to his request and attack a junior. The instant Desireless walked to the edge of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake's projection, the black substance at the edge seemed to have encountered the heavens and earth. Zhuowen looked at this scene strangely. He could not help but ask, "Junior sister Yao, is the Six Desires poison afraid of Desireless?" Yao Xiangjuan smiled and said, "Senior brother Long, you probably don't know the characteristics of the Six Desires poison. Since it's called the Six Desires poison, it's naturally related to the Seven Emotions and Six Desires. As long as one is a human, they will have the Seven Emotions and Six Desires. Even a cultivator with a high cultivation cannot achieve the state of having no desires. The Six Desires poison will follow the aura of the Seven Emotions and Six Desires in a human's body and enter the depths of one's soul. As long as one still has the Seven Emotions and Six Desires, the Six Desires poison will be able to enter one's soul without anyone noticing." When he heard this, Zhuowen also understood why the Six Desires poison would avoid Desireless. The Six Desires poison needed the Seven Emotions and Six Desires as a medium to enter a human's soul. However, Desireless did not have the Seven Emotions and Six Desires. Therefore, the Six Desires poison had no way of entering one's soul. In fact, it was very afraid of Desireless. Following behind Desireless, Zhuowen's group was extremely relaxed. They did not let the Six Desires poison approach them. When they reached the center of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake's projection, Desireless stopped. The others also stopped. Yun was inside the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. When he discovered that there was no water flow, he knew that Palace Master Wu Ju had not lied to him. This was indeed just a projection. Suddenly, Zhuowen felt the world spinning. He was not unfamiliar with this feeling. It was the feeling of being teleported. Clearly, he was in this projection and would soon be teleported to the real Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Chapter 2450. Yun Maozhe, unwilling to give up when Zhuowen opened his eyes, he realized that his entire body was soaked in water. He lowered his head and realized that he was in a colorful pond. "I've already entered the Six Desires Heavenly Lake?" Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He immediately leaped out of the water and hovered above it. Zhuowen was surprised to find that his body was not wet at all after he leaped out of the water. It was as if he had not been soaked in the water at all. His body was not even dyed by the colorful pond water. "What a strange pond water," Zhuowen muttered to himself. Only then did he start to observe his surroundings. He realized that his surroundings were gray and the visibility was very low. He could only see about 1,000 meters away. As far as his eyes could see, he realized that the surrounding soil was similar to a high slope. The surface area of this slope was not small. However, the other areas were all gray and could not be seen clearly. Therefore, Zhuowen could not estimate the surface area of this high slope. However, in Zhuowen's vision, he saw the other 4 Six Desires Heavenly Lakes. There were also 4 figures soaking in each of the 4 Six Desires Heavenly Lakes. Needless to say, these 4 figures were definitely the other 4 people who had entered the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. "Brother Long, the Six Desires Heavenly Lake will automatically distribute a corresponding number of Six Desires Heavenly Lakes according to the number of people who enter. The Six Desires Heavenly Lake contains energy that is extremely easy to absorb. Most importantly, the Six Desires Heavenly Lake can allow your comprehension to increase rapidly and help you break through your bottleneck. Yao Xiangjuan's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Zhuowen nodded towards the pond that Yao Xiangjuan was in. Soon after, he returned to his own pond and began to absorb the energy in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake without any distractions. The moment Zhuowen absorbed the energy in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, his eyes lit up with excitement. This was because he realized that as he continued to absorb the energy in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, his comprehension of the 8 steps of the void sky became more and more complete. Back when he broke through the 8 steps of the void sky, his comprehension was still lacking. However, now that he relied on the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, he realized that he understood a lot of the things that he was still confused about back then. Zhuowen's mood was lifted. He knew that according to this trend, he had the confidence to break through within a month. While the 5 of them were comprehending and breaking through in their respective Six Desires Heavenly Lakes, Desireless was floating in midair. It was as if he was unconsciously floating in midair. Whether it was intentional or not, Desireless landed on the edge of the Six Desires Heavenly Lake where Zhuowen was. He tilted his head and sized up Zhuowen. If Zhuowen opened his eyes now, he would definitely be shocked. One must know that Desireless did not have any facial features. Being sized up by such a faceless person was definitely a terrifying thing. Appearing as if he didn't discover anything, Desireless lost interest. He casually found an empty space and sat down on the ground. Time passed minute by minute. On the 20th day, Tan, who was in the leftmost pool among the 5 pools, suddenly opened his eyes. His eyes were filled with joy. "I broke through," Tan Kai muttered with a smile on his face. His cultivation was originally at the intermediate stage of the 8 steps of the Void Sky realm. This time, relying on the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, he directly broke through to the late stage of the 8 steps of the Void Sky realm. Although there were still 10 days until they left the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, Tan Kai knew that these 10 days were not enough for him to break through again. Therefore, he stopped cultivating and began to consolidate his cultivation. At the same time, he also paid attention to the people in the other pools. One day after Tan Kai broke through, Qilan also smoothly broke through. Similar to Tan Kai, her cultivation also broke through to the late stage of the 8 steps of the Void Sky realm. However, she didn't stop cultivating. Instead, she continued to absorb the Six Desires Heavenly Lake and cultivate. Clearly, she didn't want to let go of the remaining time. On the 25th day, the pool where Yun Maozhe was in suddenly soared into the sky. Soon after, a terrifying aura spread out along with the soaring water pillar. Immediately after, Yun Maozhe's wild laughter rang out. Qi Lan and Tan Kai, who had already made a breakthrough, were naturally attracted by the activity at Yun Maozhe's side. Especially when they felt the aura that was being emitted from the pool where Yun Maozhe was located, the two of them revealed a trace of surprise. "Looks like Yun Maozhe broke through to the half-step Void Sky Realm 9 steps. Although I'm a little unconvinced, this guy's talent is indeed stronger than mine." Tan Kai's eyes flickered as he muttered to himself helplessly. Qi Lan's eyes flickered, but she didn't reveal the slightest bit of surprise. Yun Maozhe's talent was originally recognized by the Six Desires Palace. However, Qi Lan was more concerned about Yao Xiangjuan, who was still absorbing the energy not far away. Yao Xiangjuan's talent was actually above Yun Maozhe's. After all, Yao Xiangjuan's cultivation was the same as Yun Maozhe's, but the time she spent cultivating was much shorter than Yun Maozhe's. Since Yun Maozhe had already broken through, Yao Xiangjuan shouldn't be far away from breaking through as well. At this moment, Yun Maozhe was floating in the air. In the void behind him, a huge void sky bridge appeared. He landed on the 8th step, then his right foot suddenly stomped on the 9th step. Suddenly, half of the 9th step lit up. Yun Maozhe's eyes flickered. He really wanted to put his left foot on the 9th step, but he knew it was basically impossible. After all, there was still a big gap between him and the real Void Sky 9th steps. This time, he had only broken through to the half-step Void Sky 9th steps. After a stalemate of about 10 breaths, Yun Maozhe finally didn't dare to put his left foot on the 9th step. He was very clear that if he forcibly put his left foot on the 9th step, he would definitely be counterattacked by the powerful energy of the Void Sky Bridge. At that time, the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. Thinking of this, Yun Maozhe withdrew his left foot and put away the Void Sky Bridge. Senior brother Yun, congratulations on breaking through to the half-step Void Sky 9th steps. As soon as Yun Maozhe landed, Tan Kai cupped his hands and congratulated Yun Maozhe. Yun Maozhe put his hands behind his back, raised his chin, and revealed a proud expression. He only nodded calmly in response to Tan Kai's congratulations. Tan Kai's face stiffened, but he didn't approach Yun Maozhe. He knew that the latter liked to show off. The closer he got, the more pretentious this guy would be. Therefore, he didn't intend to embarrass himself. Seeing that Tan Kai didn't continue to approach, Yun Maozhe was a little displeased. However, he didn't intend to pursue the matter. Instead, he looked coldly at the rightmost pool. There was a white-robed youth sitting cross-legged in the pool, silently cultivating and absorbing the energy inside. Longwon, you bastard! You bullied and humiliated me before. Now that I've broken through, I'll return everything you did to me in full detail. Yun Maozhe grinned, then took a step toward Zhuowen's pond. After breaking through, Yun Maozhe was filled with confidence. He could feel that his strength had increased by a lot compared to before. He could vaguely feel a trace of the strength of a genius. Chapter 2451. 8 Steps of the Illusionary Sky. This guy really wants to take revenge. Tan Kai looked at Yun Maozhe, who was rushing toward Zhuowen, and felt a little helpless. Although Yun Maozhe's talent was indeed very high, Tan Kai didn't have any admiration for him. It was mainly because Yun Maozhe's character wasn't very good. Qi Lan's beautiful eyes flickered. Although she wanted to stop him, she knew that she wasn't Yun Maozhe's opponent even though she had made a breakthrough. Longwen Dai. Before Yun Maozhe reached the pool where Zhuan was, his right hand had already formed a palm attack and fiercely attacked the figure in the pool. Bang, bang, bang. The terrifying energy palm smashed into the pool like a mountain. Soon after, pillars of water soared into the sky and roared in all directions. Yun Maozhe stood in the middle of the countless pillars of water. The corner of his mouth revealed a sinister smile as he looked down at the pool below. He didn't hold back at all in this palm attack. He knew that with his half-step illusionary sky 9 steps, even if he didn't kill Longwen, he could still severely injure him. After Longwen came out, he would teach him a lesson and let him know the consequences of offending him. Of course, since Longwen was a guest invited by Palace Master Jing Yun, Yun Maozhe didn't plan to kill him. He just wanted to teach him a lesson. Scram! A cold voice suddenly sounded. Soon after, an inconspicuous imperial jade seal suddenly flew out from the raging pillars of water below. As the imperial jade seal flew out, it constantly grew in size. In the end, it became 100 zhang tall and fiercely smashed towards Yun Maozhe. Yun Maozhe's pupils shrank. The moment the imperial jade seal smashed towards him, he felt the threat of death. He was completely flustered. Yun Maozhe roared and immediately took out his natal divine artifact, Cloud Vanishing Cloud. He used all his strength and heavily hacked at the imperial jade seal. Ding! A crisp sound accompanied by countless sparks rang out. Soon after, Yun Maozhe's pupils shrank as he discovered that his Cloud Vanishing Cloud was actually broken. His right hand that was holding the spear was twisted due to the huge force. Puchi! Yun Maozhe suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and then flew out, smashing into the soil not far away in an extremely sorry state, creating a huge pit. Qi Lan and Tan Kai stared blankly at this scene, their eyes filled with horror. They saw with their own eyes that Yun Maozhe's natal divine artifact, Cloud Vanishing, had been broken under the attack of the Imperial Jade Seal. Yun Maozhe himself was lying in the huge pit, on the verge of death, as though he would die at any moment. The pillar of water gradually receded, and then Jun, dressed in white, slowly stepped out of the void. He withdrew his right hand, and the phagocytosis shrunk to the size of a palm and landed in his palm. At this moment, Zhuowen's gaze was extremely unfriendly as he stared coldly at the half-dead Yun Maozhe lying in the huge pit not far away. Just now, Zhuowen had already reached the most critical moment. Just when he was about to break through, Yun Maozhe's attack had directly interrupted him from his cultivation state, causing the aura he had worked so hard to break through to the next level to directly collapse and disappear without a trace. Zhuowen was very clear that if he wanted to gather the aura to break through again, he would have to spend a lot of time. There were only 5 days left in the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. The time was really too short. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's killing intent towards Yun Maozhe became even more intense. If it weren't for this guy, his breakthrough wouldn't have been in vain. This long one is really abnormal. He actually beat Yun Maozhe, who had broken through to the 9th step of the half-step virtual sky realm, into a half-dead state with just one move? Tan Kai swallowed his saliva and spat out these words while trembling with fear. Now, Tan Kai was truly terrified. He realized that the white-clothed youth before him was truly unfathomable. To be able to defeat Yun Maozhe in one move, just how powerful did this guy have to be? Qi Lan was also shocked. Although she knew that Zhuowen was very strong, she didn't expect him to be so ridiculously strong. To be able to defeat a half-step virtual sky realm expert in one move, perhaps only a life-comprehending realm expert could do that. Could it be that this Zhuowen was actually a life-comprehending realm expert? You've ruined the timing of my advancement. You've done well. I didn't want to kill you, but unfortunately, you're the one who provoked me. You can go in peace. Zhuowen's eyes surged with killing intent. With a wave of his sleeve, he planned to use the phagocytosis to thoroughly kill Yun Maozhe. Senior Brother Long, you mustn't. Qi Lan hurriedly said, if you kill Yun Maozhe, you will be wanted by the Six Desires Palace. At that time, you won't be able to walk out of the Six Desires Palace. After Qi Lan's reminder, Yun calmed down. After all, Yun Maozhe was the eldest disciple of the Desire Palace. If he was killed like this, Palace Master Wu Ju would definitely not let him off. Yun Maozhe, I'm warning you. If you dare to disturb me again, even if I have to risk offending the Six Desires Palace, I will kill you. After regaining his calm, Yun threatened the half-dead Yun Maozhe and returned to the Six Desires Heavenly Lake. Now that there wasn't much time left, he had to make every second count to regain the momentum he had gained from advancing. Otherwise, after leaving the Six Desires Heavenly Lake, his advancement to the illusionary sky 8 steps would be far away. Yun Maozhe struggled to crawl out of the hole and spat out another mouthful of blood. His face was pale as he looked at the pool where Zhuowen was. His eyes were filled with fear. If he knew that Zhuowen's strength was so terrifying, he wouldn't have dared to provoke him even if he had 10 times the courage. After swallowing a healing pill, Yun Maozhe fell into his own pool. He swore in his heart that he would never provoke Zhuowen again. Qi Lan and Tan Kai were also frightened. The two of them didn't even dare to look at Zhuowen. They knew that it would be too easy for Zhuowen to kill the 4 of them. Another 3 days passed. There were still 2 days before the Six Desires Heavenly Lake closed. Yao Xiangjuan finally broke through to the half-step virtual sky realm 9 steps. After successfully breaking through, Yao Xiangjuan glanced at the pool where Zhuowen was. When she saw that Zhuowen still hadn't broken through, her eyebrows immediately furrowed. According to her calculations, Zhuowen would definitely break through to the virtual sky realm 8 steps faster than her. Now that she had broken through, Zhuowen still hadn't broken through. It was really strange. Because Yao Xiangjuan was too focused on cultivation, the conflict between Zhuowen and Yun Maozhe didn't wake her up. Therefore, she didn't know that there was a fierce conflict between Zhuowen and Yun Maozhe. Another 2 days passed. Today was the last day. Yao Xiangjuan was also a little anxious. She was very clear that if Zhuowen still hadn't broken through, then it wouldn't be so easy for him to break through when he went out. Boom, boom, boom. Suddenly, the originally quiet pool of Zhuowen was filled with countless splashes of water. Waves of water splashed everywhere as if there were a group of demons dancing wildly. Above the countless splashes of water, an incomparably huge purple virtual sky bridge floated in the air. This guy's virtual sky bridge is so huge? Yun Maozhe immediately noticed Zhuowen's virtual sky bridge and couldn't help but exclaim. Chapter 2452. Tearing force. Amidst the countless splashes, a white figure suddenly leaped up and landed on the seventh step of the enormous illusory heavenly bridge. Zhuan looked at the last two steps that were still dim, but his eyes were filled with confidence. Now that he was about to step onto the eighth step, the ninth step was one step closer to him. Zhuan was very clear that as long as his cultivation base could smoothly advance to the life-comprehending realm, then he would completely possess the qualifications to be on equal footing with the other lords of the heaven domains. He would also have a lot of authority to speak. One had to know that he planned to advance to the life-comprehending realm after comprehending the space-time law to perfection. Therefore, if he successfully advanced to the life-comprehending realm, his strength would not be comparable to ordinary life-comprehending realm cultivators. However, Zhuan also knew that his path of advancement was destined to be much more difficult than ordinary cultivators. Zhuan suddenly stepped onto the eighth step without any obstruction, and the enormous eighth step of the illusory heavenly bridge was completely lit up by Zhuan. The moment Zhuan stepped onto the eighth step, his entire body felt incomparably comfortable, as if his entire body had been reborn. He could also clearly feel that his strength had undergone a qualitative change after advancing to the eighth step of the illusory heavenly bridge. If he did not rely on the everlasting ice lotus, Zhuan might not be as good as a life-comprehending realm expert, but at least he would not be in such a sorry state when facing a life-comprehending realm expert like before. Of course, if he added the everlasting ice lotus and the mysterious death energy on his body, he would have the strength to fight a life-comprehending realm expert. Even if he encountered a weaker life-comprehending realm cultivator, Zhuan would be completely defeated. After advancing to the eighth step of the illusory heavenly bridge, Zhuan did not continue. Instead, he landed on the illusory heavenly bridge and put it away. Senior Brother Long, congratulations on advancing to the eighth step of the illusory heavenly bridge. Yao Xiangjuan sincerely cupped her fists at Zhuan. Zhuan smiled slightly and sighed in his heart. He had finally advanced to the eighth step of the illusory heavenly bridge. It could be said that advancing to the void sky 8 steps was a qualitative change for him. Of course, if he could reach the 9 steps void sky, then he would be reborn. However, this was only Zhuowen's fantasy. Qi Lan and Tan Kai also hurried forward to congratulate Zhuan. After knowing Zhuowen's strength, the two of them had the intention to befriend him. After all, Zhuowen's strength was truly rare. They could foresee that Zhuowen's future potential would be limitless. On the other hand, Yun Maozhe stood in a corner and looked at Zhuowen with fear in his eyes. He didn't dare to approach Zhuan. Zhuan merely glanced at Yun Maozhe and did not pay much attention to him. From the very beginning, he had not paid much attention to Yun Maozhe. After all, the gap between the two of them was too great. At this moment, Desireless, who was seated cross-legged not far away, slowly stood up. Without saying a word, she brushed past the 5 of them. Then she slowly walked forward. "What's she doing?" Zhuan asked in astonishment. "It's almost time for the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Desireless is planning to bring us out of here. We just need to follow behind her," Yao Xiangjuan explained with a smile. Hearing this, Zhuan nodded. Soon after, the 5 of them tacitly followed behind Desireless. Desireless arrived at a white circle of light that was several meters wide. With a single glance, Zhuan could tell that this circle of light was a teleportation array. After the 5 of them stood still, Desireless formed a seal with her hands. Soon after, everyone was enveloped in white light and a teleportation power spread out around them. After roughly 20 breaths of time, Zhuan discovered that he was still inside the circle of light. At the same time, a terrifying tearing force enveloped his body. It seemed as though it wanted to ruthlessly tear him to pieces. Zhuan discovered that something was wrong. He discovered that the tearing force in the surrounding white light was becoming more and more terrifying. A miserable shriek came from beside Zhuan. Zhuan was resisting the tearing force with great difficulty. With great difficulty, he managed to form his divine sense. Then he discovered that Tan Kai, who was beside him, had actually been torn to pieces by the tearing force. Blood splattered all over the place. The instant Tan Kai was torn apart, Qi Lan also spat out a mouthful of blood. Her face turned pale and her body started to distort. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. With a cold snort, he immediately took out the phagocytosis. It turned into a mountain-like giant and blocked Qi-Lan's surroundings. With the protection of the phagocytosis, Qi-Lan, who was originally on the verge of dying, was barely able to keep her life. With great difficulty, Qi-Lan turned her head around and nodded gratefully at Jun. Her eyes were filled with gratitude. Puchi. At that moment, a bloody hole immediately appeared on Zhuo Wen's right shoulder. That was because he was unable to endure the terrifying tearing power. That was why the powerful tearing wound appeared. Jun hurriedly operated his divine power. Only then was he able to resist the tearing force. However, he knew that he wouldn't be able to hold on for long. The tearing force was too terrifying. Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe were relatively stronger. As such, they were barely able to hold on. At this moment, Desireless didn't say a single word. He stood at the front and extended his slender jade-like hand. Suddenly, the terrifying tearing force weakened a lot. Yao Xiangjuan and Yun Maozhe, who were bitterly holding on, finally relaxed a lot. As for Jun, he withdrew the phagocytosis from his palm and looked ahead with a grave expression. Yao Xiangjuan and Qi-Lan arrived beside Jun. As for Yun Maozhe, he also approached them. However, he didn't dare to get too close to Jun. Exactly what's going on? What a terrifying tearing force. Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes revealed a terrified expression as she spoke. Jun shook his head. Even he didn't know exactly what was going on. This strange tearing force had suddenly appeared in the teleportation array. It was as though some terrifying force had bombarded the teleportation array during the teleportation. Boom, boom, boom. The terrifying sound waves became even denser. The source of the sound waves was on the other side of the teleportation array. At this moment, Desireless, slender jade-like hand seals were constantly forming hand seals. Surging energy surged out and blocked the terrifying tearing force coming from the other side of the teleportation array. At the same time, Desireless dutifully led the group of 4 forward. As they got closer to the source of the teleportation array, Jun discovered that the rumbling sounds in his ears had become even denser. It was as though experts were fighting intensely. Jun wasn't unfamiliar with this sound. Yao Xiangjuan and the others also revealed shocked expressions. Clearly, they had also heard the sounds of fighting. Someone actually dared to invade the 6 Desires Palace. How audacious! Yun Maozhe said in a low voice with a gloomy expression. Exactly what's going on? We'll know once we get out. Yao Xiangjuan said indifferently. Rip. Desireless, jade-like hand suddenly made a grabbing motion in front of her, forcibly tearing the obstruction of the teleportation array into pieces. Soon after, she led the group out of the teleportation array. Zhuowen surveyed his surroundings and discovered that they were still in a desolate region. Clearly, they had really come out of the teleportation array. However, at this moment, the desolate region was even more desolate and dilapidated than before. Many dim stars had been destroyed beyond recognition and had turned into ruins. They stared at the old man and the man in animal skin with fear. Are you guys all right? Although Palace Master Wu Jue said so, she only looked at Yun Maozhe and Yao Xiangjuan with concern. Jun walked to the side of Palace Master Jing Yun, while Qi-Lan returned to the back of Palace Master Hua Ting. Where's Tan Kai? Palace Master Xiang Lan of the Fragrant Desire Palace did not see Tan Kai's figure and realized that something was amiss. She immediately asked. Yao Xiangjuan said in a somewhat apologetic manner, Martial Ant Xiang Lan, when the 5 of us were teleporting back, something unexpected happened. A frightening tearing power was transmitted from the teleportation. Senior brother Tan Kai was the first to be struck by it. Yao Xiangjuan did not finish her words. She knew that Xiang Lan would understand what was going on. Grief appeared in Xiang Lan's eyes. After all, Tan Kai was the head disciple of their Fragrant Desire Palace. Yet, he had actually died in such a manner. How could she not be furious? He, old Lord Tusida, the 2 of you will die miserably. Xiang Lan vented her anger and cursed at the old man and the man in animal skin. However, regardless of whether it was Old Lord Tusida or Yema Z, they did not take Xianglan's curses to heart. The two of them were experts in the life and death realm. Thus, they did not take Xianglan, a life comprehension realm expert, to heart. Instead, the two of them looked toward Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue, I always thought that Desireless was a groundless person. I never expected that you would really nurture a desireless person. However, I pity the vessel of this desireless person. In the end, it might become a wedding dress for someone else. Old Lord Tusida looked at Desireless, who was standing beside Palace Master Wujue. His turbid eyes shone brightly. Soon after, he ridiculed Desireless. Palace Master Wujue's eyes flickered. However, she sneered and said, Old Lord Tusida, why did the two of you target me the moment you arrived? I don't remember my 6 Desires Palace offending your Tusida Palace and Yema Palace, right? Old Lord Tusida chuckled and said, Don't talk about us. It was Yema Z who attacked you the moment he arrived. I'm a person who doesn't like to fight. As for Yema V, it might be because he hasn't fought for so long that his hands are itching. The corners of Palace Master Wujue's eyes couldn't help but twitch when she heard this reason. However, she quickly calmed down. Palace Master Wujue and the other 5 Palace Masters had naturally come here to welcome Yao Xiangjuan's group. However, just as they arrived, Yema Z and Old Lord Tusita suddenly appeared. Yema Z was like a mad dog. He immediately pounced at Palace Master Wujue and started fighting with her. As for the teleportation process that Zhuo 1 and the others were in, they were affected by the shockwaves from the battle between Yema Z and Palace Master Wujue. That was why such a change occurred. If it wasn't for Desireless, they would have been unable to leave. Palace Master Wujue also knew that Yema Z's sudden attack was definitely planned. His goal was to show her his strength. What is your goal? Palace Master Wujue couldn't help but ask. If it was only Old Lord Tusida or Yema Z, Palace Master Wujue wouldn't be afraid. However, 2 life and death realm experts had suddenly appeared. This was especially true for Old Lord Tusida. This old man was extremely cunning. Moreover, his cultivation was even higher than hers. Even Palace Master Wujue couldn't help but feel nervous when facing these 2 people. Old Lord Tusida grinned and said, Palace Master Wujue, our request is very simple. It's the desireless cultivation technique. Of course, if you give me this desireless directly, I won't mind. Palace Master Wujue sneered and said, The desireless cultivation technique is the strongest cultivation technique of my 6 Desires Palace. Why should I give it to you? Old Lord Tusida didn't mind at all and said indifferently, Palace Master Wujue, don't worry. I won't take your desireless cultivation technique for free. I'll take out a corresponding item to exchange with you. The price definitely won't disappoint you. Palace Master Wujue mocked. Alright. Doesn't your Tusida Palace have a divine proof pill? If you give me that divine proof pill, I'll give you the desireless cultivation technique. As soon as Palace Master Wujue said this, Zhuowen's pupils shrank. He didn't expect the Tusida Palace to have a divine proof pill. It was said that the divine proof pill could increase the chances of reaching the Tao. It was something that all life and death realm experts yearned for even in their dreams. At present, Yuan had never seen a divine proof pill. However, he didn't expect the Tusida Palace to have such a divine proof pill. Chapter 2454. Spring and Snow Palace Master Wujue sneered. The desireless cultivation technique was left behind by the founder of my 6 Desires Palace. It contains the secret of Tao affirmation. I know you want the secret of Tao affirmation, but you don't even want to exchange the Tao affirmation divine pill. Do you think I'll give you the desireless cultivation technique? Old Lord Tusida smiled faintly. Do you think you have any other choice? Your 6 Desires Palace won't be able to stop me and Yema Z. That's not necessarily true. Palace Master Wujue's eyes were gloomy. He ordered the 5 Palace Masters to leave as soon as possible and return to 6 Desires Palace. Then, he threw out the horsetail whisk in his hand at Old Lord Tusida. However, Yema Z sneered and intercepted Palace Master Wujue. Then, the two of them started fighting again. The battle between the two extreme life and death realm experts was absolutely shocking. Even Zhuan felt his heart skip a beat as he watched from the side. Zhuan knew very well that if he were to face such an expert, he wouldn't be able to withstand a single blow and would die without a doubt. "Let's leave this place quickly," Palace Master Jing Yun hurriedly said. Then she took out a flying divine tool and left with Zhuan in a stream of light. The other palace masters also took out their flying divine tools. "Why are you in such a hurry to leave? Take this old man with you. As long as you hand over the desireless cultivation technique, this old man will give each of you a life or death pill." Old Lord Tusida's voice was faintly discernible and instantly appeared in their ears. It was as if Old Lord Tusida was whispering in their ears. Zhuan was shocked. He thought that Old Lord Tusida was really rich. He actually wanted to give out 5 life or death pills. One must know that he had risked his life to obtain the life or death pill from the divine pill secret realm. It was also partly due to luck. From Old Lord Tusida's tone, one could tell that this old man didn't care about the life or death pill too much. After hearing about the life or death pill, the 5 palace masters hesitated for a moment. However, they still suppressed the impulse in their hearts and left this place. "So, looks like you guys are refusing a toast only to be forced to drink a forfeit. In that case, I have no choice but to use crude means to make you guys obedient." Old Lord Tusida sighed softly and continued to hover in the air. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and instantly, 2 streams of black and white energy surged out. The 2 streams of black and white energy swirled around each other, then transformed into an enormous black and white flood dragon that was 3,000 meters long. Dao Lord Tusida stood atop the flood dragon, which roared and shot forward in pursuit of the 5 palace lords. Rumble! Unfortunately, the moment the black and white flood dragons flew out, they were blocked by a slender figure. Desireless' slender body blocked the black and white flood dragon's path. Her slender jade-like hands began to form hand seals, and countless traces of Dao surged out from her body, causing the black and white flood dragon to completely stop in midair. Dao Lord Tusida silently looked at Desireless before him with eyes filled with admiration. He muttered in a low voice, "This Desireless is truly perfect. He's actually so compatible with the heavenly Dao. He's clearly only at the life comprehension realm, yet he's so powerful." Unfortunately, Desireless' core Dao has been grasped by Wujue. If that wasn't the case, I would have snatched this perfect Desireless and nurtured him myself. Dao Lord Tusida shook his head and looked at Desireless before him, a trace of pity appearing in his eyes. Bang! Dao Lord Tusida casually swung the horsetail whisk in his hand. Instantly, the black and white energies transformed into countless lines that bombarded Desireless. Bang! Desireless let out a muffled groan and couldn't help but retreat. The traces of Dao circulating around his body were sliced into pieces by the black and white lines. Many holes appeared on the linen clothes on his body, from which cherry-red blood flowed out. He appeared to be in an extremely sorry state. However, this Desireless wasn't simple at all. With a light wave of his lily-white hand, countless traces of Dao energy revolved around his body and condensed into a sparkling and translucent zither. Desireless' slender and jade-like hands rapidly strummed the zither strings. Instantly, terrifying traces of Dao energy surged out like waves along with the zither music. Extremely sharp killing intent was contained within the zither music. The black and white lines that were originally unstoppable like a hot knife through butter were completely annihilated by the zither music that contained killing intent. Spring white snow? Wujue, that madman, actually gave the heaven-crushing source fragment, spring white snow, to this Desireless. Isn't that guy afraid of a backlash? Dao Lord Tusida's expression finally changed. The zither music grew louder and louder, and the killing intent soared into the sky. It was as though the entire area had turned into a terrifying battlefield in an instant, as all kinds of sounds of battle rang out incessantly. On the flying-type divine tool, Nguyen had been paying attention to the battle behind him the entire time. When his gaze landed on the zither in Desireless' hand, his pupils abruptly shrank. Although this zither was formed by Tao energy, Yuan was able to tell with a single glance that the appearance of this zither was too similar to the zither that Moyan Wushang had held in his hand when he had parted ways with him. Junior sister Qilin, did the song, "A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix," that you played back then come from Desireless? Zhuan looked at Qilin, who was standing behind Palace Master Huating, and asked through voice transmission. His voice contained an unquestionable tone. Qilin's beautiful eyes flickered, but she remained silent. Junior sister Qilin, please tell me, Zhuan said in a very serious manner. Qilin sighed softly. Originally, she didn't want to answer Zhuan. However, when she recalled that Zhuan had saved her life before, she truly couldn't bear to refuse his request. Senior brother Long, I indeed heard that song from Desireless. However, I don't think she's the friend you're talking about, right? Qilin said with uncertainty. Zhuan's heart sank. He continued, did she willingly become a Desireless? That should be the case. After all, cultivating the Desireless cultivation technique has a very high probability of successfully validating one's Tao. Otherwise, it's impossible for someone to willingly abandon the 6 desires and become a Desireless without any perception, Qilin replied through voice transmission. Zhuan sneered. He didn't say anything else. Instead, he leaped out of the flying-type divine tool. He was very clear about Moyan Wushang's character. She wasn't someone who truly had the ambition to reach the peak. Even though she had cultivated with all her might, it was only to help him. How could such a stubborn girl abandon the 6 desires and pursue the illusory heavenly Tao? Abandoning the 6 desires was equivalent to forgetting Zhuan. She wouldn't even be able to perceive him. Zhuan was now even more certain that Moyan Wushang didn't willingly become a Desireless. Moreover, when Moyan Wushang parted ways with him, she played the song, "A Male Phoenix Seeking a Female Phoenix." Now, she was playing it again in the 6 Desires Palace. This meant that she was still reluctant to part with this world. She was also using the zither to resist her current fate. Chapter 2455. Inyang Pisces Longwen come back. Palace Master Jing Yun quickly noticed Yun, who jumped out of the flying divine tool. She could not help but reach out with her right hand in an attempt to grab Zhuan. Unfortunately, Zhuan kicked with both legs and cleverly dodged Palace Master Jing Yun's grab. Palace Master Jing Yun, thank you for bringing me to the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake. Now that this matter is over, we don't owe each other anything. See you again. After saying that, Zhuan turned into a stream of light and disappeared from the spot. Palace Master Jing Yun stared blankly at the disappearing figure. Soon after, she felt a little dispirited. Originally, she thought that Zhuan was someone who valued relationships and loyalty. Now that he chose to leave at this critical juncture, Palace Master Jing Yun's opinion of Zhuan changed a lot. Jing Yun Longwen left just like that. I'm afraid that he saw that our 6 Desires Palace is in trouble and fled first. Should we capture him? Palace Master Xiang Lan said gloomily. Palace Master Jing Yun shook her head and said, forget it. This time, I brought him to the 6 Desires Heavenly Lake to return a favor. Now that I've returned his favor, we don't owe each other anything in the future. Just ignore him. Since Palace Master Jing Yun had already said so, Palace Master Xiang Lan naturally had nothing else to say. Hence, the group continued to fly towards the 6 Desires Palace. On the flying divine tool, Yao Xiangjuan's beautiful eyes were locked. She sighed softly and did not say anything. Although she was somewhat disappointed by Zhuo Wen's decision to flee at the last moment, she felt that Zhuo Wen wasn't such a person. Perhaps Big Brother Zhuo has other important matters to attend to. That's why he's in a hurry to leave. Yao Xiangjuan could not help but comfort herself. In the desolate region, the battle between Palace Master Wujue and Yemazi was getting more and more intense. The battle between the 2 extremes of life and death was too terrifying. Every move they made could annihilate countless stars. If one looked carefully, Yemazi was still slightly inferior. At this moment, he was being suppressed by Palace Master Wujue. It would not be long before he was defeated. Although both of them were at the extremes of life and death, there was still a difference in strength between them. Even if one's cultivation level was the same, one's strength would not be the same. While Palace Master Wu Jue was suppressing Yema Zi, she also noticed the battle on the other side. The battle between Sage Lord Tusida and Desireless had reached its climax. Although the battle between Old Lord Tusida and Desireless appeared to be evenly matched, Palace Master Wu Jue's heart sank. He knew very well that Old Lord Tusida was very powerful, and even stronger than him. Only he had yet to use his full strength. If Old Lord Tusida were to use his full strength, Desireless would likely be destroyed. Palace Master Wu Jue gritted her teeth. Her attacks became increasingly fierce. She planned to defeat Yema Zi as soon as possible and then take Desireless away. This Desireless was the first woman to have such a high compatibility with the Desireless cultivation technique. If she were to destroy this Desireless, it would be very difficult for her to find another Desireless who was as perfect as him. At this moment, Old Lord Tusida was waving his horsetail whisk nonstop. However, he had a relaxed expression on his face. On the other hand, Desireless was having a very difficult time resisting his attacks. His lily-white hands were rapidly playing the zither. Frightening amounts of Taoist rhymes erupted from his zither and blocked the attacks of Old Lord Tusida's horsetail whisk. "I'm not going to play with you anymore. Desireless, your Desireless cultivation technique has yet to reach perfection. Although your strength is pretty good, it's still far from enough." Old Lord Tusida lightly smiled. With a wave of his horsetail whisk, countless amounts of black and white energies immediately turned into two black and white fishes. The head and tail of the two fishes were connected to each other. Then they started to rapidly spin and shoot out. Desireless hands started to play the zither even faster. His Taoist rhymes started to violently surge forth like a tide. Unfortunately, even though Desireless Taoist rhymes were very powerful, they were completely useless against the black and white fishes. When the Taoist rhymes collided with the black and white fishes, they were easily neutralized. Desireless still had an expressionless face. He held his zither with both hands and tapped the air with his feet. While retreating, he continued to attack the black and white fishes. He hoped that he would be able to neutralize the might of the black and white fishes with his attacks. Unfortunately, the black and white fishes were truly too frightening. Desireless attacks were unable to stop the black and white fishes at all. Thus, Desireless could only continuously retreat. Although Desireless did not have any desires, and did not even have any perception, his divine sense was terrifyingly powerful. Thus, he knew how frightening the black and white fishes were. He had a premonition that if he were to be struck by the black and white fishes, even if he didn't die, he would lose a layer of skin. "Old Lord Tusida, you actually took out a heaven-crushing source energy?" Palace Master Wu Jue, who was originally fighting against Yema Zi, also noticed what was happening. Especially when he saw the black and white fishes, his pupils shrunk to the extreme. He couldn't help but cry out in alarm. The heaven-crushing source energy fragment of the Tusida heavenly domain was called the yin-yang pill fish. Its might was not the slightest bit inferior to the heaven-crushing source energy of the Six Desires heavenly domain, the spring white snow. Furthermore, due to Old Lord Tusida being extremely proficient in using the yin-yang pill fish, the might of the yin-yang pill fish was naturally much greater than Palace Master Wu Jue's. Originally, Desireless, who was compatible with the heavenly Tao, would be able to display an extremely powerful might when using the spring white snow. However, Desireless cultivation was still too low. There was still a gap between him and Old Lord Tusida. Even though the spring white snow was being controlled by Desireless, it was still at a disadvantage when fighting against an old fox like Old Lord Tusida. Juan was hidden in the darkness of the starry sky. As he looked at the yin-yang pill fish used by Old Lord Tusida, his heart involuntarily started to beat wildly. The yin-yang pill fish looked very ordinary. However, for some unknown reason, it gave Zhuan an extremely dangerous feeling. This feeling of danger was very strong. It was as if Zhuan was an insignificant ant in front of the yin-yang pill fish, and the yin-yang pill fish was a vast mountain. Is this the Tusida heaven domain's heaven-crushing source energy? Yuan naturally heard Palace Master Wu Jue's words. He didn't expect Old Lord Tusida to take out the heaven-crushing source energy so quickly. Actually, what Yuan didn't know was that the reason Old Lord Tusida took out the heaven-crushing source energy was because Desireless had taken out the spring white snow from the very beginning. The sparkling and translucent zither in Desireless' hand was formed from the spring white snow. Whoever started the trouble should end it. If one wanted to defeat a cultivator with the heaven-crushing source energy, they naturally had to use the heaven-crushing source energy. At this moment, Old Lord Tusida was still rejoicing that Desireless wasn't very proficient in using the spring white snow. Therefore, he was able to suppress Desireless by using the heaven-crushing source energy. Seeing the black and white fish getting closer and closer to Desireless, Yuan started to feel somewhat anxious. He really wanted to rush out and save Desireless. However, Yuan knew that even though his current strength wasn't bad, the 4 people in front of him were all much stronger than him. If he rushed over now, he would simply be throwing his life away. Perhaps he would die on the spot before he could save Desireless. Moreover, Yuan also noticed that Old Lord Tusida, who was controlling the black and white fish, would occasionally look in his direction. Perhaps Old Lord Tusida had already discovered him. However, Old Lord Tusida didn't place him in his eyes. Chapter 2456. Dao Proving Tools. Yuan heaved a sigh of relief. He was certain that Old Lord Tusida had already noticed him when he'd arrived. Fortunately, Old Lord Tusida did not pay too much attention to him. After all, he knew that his cultivation was nothing in Old Lord Tusida's eyes. Bang! The black and white fishes finally arrived before Desireless. With no other choice, Desireless formed hand seals and controlled the zither in his hand to violently smash against the black and white fishes. The collision between the 2 great essences was extremely powerful. Large swaths of the starry sky were destroyed, forming a black hole that grew larger and larger. All of the stars, meteorites, and other materials in the surrounding starry sky were annihilated into nothingness. Palace Master Wu Ju and Yema Zi, who were originally fighting, could not help but stop their battle. The 2 of them distanced themselves from this region in shock. Looking at the terrifying destructive power, they were both stupefied. They never imagined that the collision between the 2 great essences would actually cause such a terrifying might. Furthermore, the shockwaves from the collision were rapidly spreading from the original desolate region to the rest of the 6 Desires star field. At the instant when the 2 great essences collided, Yuan immediately took out the space-time wheel and rushed towards Desireless, who was sent flying. Yuan grabbed Desireless' slender waist. Without the slightest hesitation, he controlled the space-time wheel and fled into the distance. Unfortunately, he had truly underestimated the shockwaves from the collision between the 2 great essences. The instant he saved Desireless, the shockwaves from the collision had already reached him. Immediately, Yuan took out all of the defensive methods he had on him. However, it only took an instant for all of his defensive methods to be turned into nothingness the instant they came into contact with the shockwaves. Even the surface of the phagocytosis was covered in extremely deep and terrifying cracks. This gave Yuan quite a fright. The phagocytosis was King Devourer's life treasure. Its toughness was definitely close to that of a Dao-confirming divine weapon. Yet, cracks had started to appear on it from the shockwaves. Fortunately, this phagocytosis bought Yuan some time. Yuan activated the space-time wheel and retrieved the cracked phagocytosis. Then, he turned into a stream of light and disappeared. What shocked Yuan was that the space-time wheel's speed was very fast, but the ripples spread even faster. They caught up with the space-time wheel in an instant. Yuan was affected by a small ripple. He groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. This was only a small ripple. If he was caught up by the remaining ripples, he would not be able to survive. At the thought of this, Yuan took out the space-time core without hesitation and pressed it into the space-time wheel. Senior, I have no enmity with you. Why are you chasing after me? Yuan stood in the space-time ocean and stared vigilantly at Old Lord Tusida. Then he cupped his fists and asked in a deep voice. Old Lord Tusida looked at the space-time ocean surrounding Zhuowen with a strange expression. He did not expect that this little guy before him not only possessed the space-time wheel, but also comprehended the space-time divine ability. This was somewhat amazing. Indeed, this old man possesses neither grievances nor hatred with you. However, of all things, you shouldn't have abducted Desireless. Furthermore, you abducted him from this old man's hands. Tell me, if I don't hunt you down, who should I hunt down? Old Monarch Tusida said indifferently. Although Old Lord Tusida's tone was extremely calm, Yuan could feel a chilling killing intent. This old man's killing intent had already locked onto him. As long as Yuan showed any signs of escaping, this old man would not hesitate to kill him. Yuan cupped his fists again and asked respectfully, "Senior, may I ask why you are chasing after Desireless? She doesn't seem to have offended you." Old Lord Tusida said indifferently, "This Desireless is that old woman Wu Jue's tool to prove her Tao. If that old woman succeeds in proving her Tao, I, her old neighbor, will definitely be killed by that old woman as an example to others. I will not allow that to happen." "Tool to prove her Tao?" Zhuowen asked doubtfully. Chapter 2457. Daunting but not dangerous. Zhuowen secretly took out the blood jade and looked at old man Tusida with vigilance. The blood jade was given to him by the mysterious head in the blood-stained cliff. It was said that this item could help him escape from a life and death crisis. The mysterious head was a Tao-confirming expert when it was alive. Therefore, the blood jade it gave was definitely not simple. Zhuowen didn't dare to be careless when facing old man Tusida, who was a life and death realm expert. "Senior, Desireless is my best friend. Only now did I know that she has become a Desireless of the Six Desires Palace. This is also the reason why this junior is willing to risk his life to save her." Zhuowen cupped his fists and said. Old Lord Tushida looked at Zhuowen in astonishment. His gaze was filled with a strange color as he said, "She's actually your best friend. You're really too unlucky. Desireless is truly powerless to reverse the situation. It's basically impossible to return to the past. Moreover, that old hag Wu Jue must have some sort of trump card in order to control Desireless. You don't need to do something superfluous. I'll help you kill her." "Senior, forgive me for not being able to comply." Zhuowen's gaze turned cold. His right hand suddenly pointed down, and the sun in the sky suddenly fell and heavily smashed towards old man Tusida. Old Lord Tushida frowned slightly. He really couldn't understand why a mere 8 steps void sky ant would dare to attack him, an expert of the two extremes of life and death. "Since you're courting death, I'll fulfill your wish." Old man Tusida sneered. He swung the horsetail whisk in his hand and smashed it against the sun. Then, Zhuowen's pupils shrunk. He discovered that the powerful sun had actually been smashed into countless specks of light by the horsetail whisk. However, the sun wasn't completely useless. Old man Tusida's movements also paused for a moment because of this. Zhuowen took advantage of this moment to immediately carry Moyan of Wushang and fly forward. At the same time, the torch dragon wings on his back unfolded and turned into a bolt of lightning. Old Lord Tusida sneered and gently stroked the horsetail whisk in his hand. A wave of black and white energy transformed into an endless rope that shot out and wrapped around Zhuowen. Zhuowen took out the king's sword and suddenly activated the death chi on the surface. He ruthlessly slashed at the rope and actually cut it apart. This guy actually has death chi. Old Lord Tusida let out a soft cry of surprise and immediately summoned his horsetail whisk. The white hairs at the front of the whisk transformed into a boundless wall, blocking Zhuowen's path forward. Zhuowen turned around and stared coldly at the slowly approaching Old Lord Tusida. He began to grip the blood jade in his hand tightly. He hoped that the mysterious head hadn't lied to him and that the power of the blood jade could really stop Old Lord Tusida. Old Lord Tusida also noticed the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand. His casual look suddenly turned serious, and his footsteps came to a halt. "What are you holding in your hand?" Old Lord Tusida's eyes flickered. At his level of cultivation, there was basically nothing that could cause him to feel a great sense of danger. However, the blood jade in Zhuowen's hand was an exception. Old Lord Tusida actually felt an extremely strong sense of danger from the blood rain. This was the first time in countless years that Old Lord Tusida felt such a strong sense of danger, so he subconsciously asked. Zhuowen took a deep breath and said, "Senior, I obtained this blood jade by accident from the corpse of a dead expert who had attained the Tao." Zhuowen didn't say much and stopped there. He knew that the reputation of a Tao affirmation expert was greater than anything else. It was enough to make Old Lord Tusida apprehensive. He only had one chance to obtain the blood jade. If he could use it to make Old Lord Tusida cower, then it couldn't be better. After all, he had no enmity with Old Lord Tusida. If he had no other choice, he really didn't want to make an enemy of such an expert. Old Lord Tusida narrowed his eyes and said excitedly, "Where did you see the remains of a Tao affirmation expert? Tell me." Zhuowen's eyes flickered and he said in a deep voice, "As long as you let me go, I won't mind telling you. If you still don't intend to let me go, then I can only activate this blood jade and fight with my life on the line." Old Lord Tusida calmed down and looked at the blood jade in fear. He knew that Zhuowen wasn't lying. At his level of cultivation, there was nothing that could threaten him unless it was something of a Tao affirmation expert. Since this blood jade could make him feel such a strong sense of danger, it couldn't be anything other than something of a Tao affirmation expert. After pondering for a moment, Old Lord Tusida nodded and said, "I can let you go, but Desireless is a scourge. Palace Master Wuju's method is buried in his body. Taking him away is equivalent to letting Palace Master Wuju know your location." Speaking up to this point, Old Lord Tusida took out a jade box and threw it to Zhuowen, saying, "This jade box contains a kind of medicinal powder that can block the imprints of life and death experts. However, it has a time limit. I advise you to take Desireless and leave the 6 Desires heavenly domain. That way, that old hag Wuju won't be able to find you." Zhuowen took the jade box and scanned it with his divine sense. He found that it was indeed a medicinal powder. However, he wasn't sure if this medicinal powder was real, so he had to go to the pill tower to verify it. "Thank you, Senior. The location of the Tao affirmation expert is recorded in this jade slip. If Senior wants to go there, you can go there according to the records in this jade slip." Zhuowen took out a jade slip and threw it to Old Lord Tusida. Then he took out the space-time wheel and immediately left this place. Old Lord Tusida took the jade slip and scanned it with his divine sense. He frowned slightly and said, "It's actually the space-time quicksand river. The space-time disk shattered there. I didn't expect to find the remains of a Tao affirmation expert after leaving the space-time disk. I have to go there and take a look." Zhuowen didn't lie to Old Lord Tusida. However, what was in the deepest part of the space-time quicksand river wasn't the remains of a Tao affirmation expert, but a Tao affirmation expert who was still alive. Although it was only a head, its strength shouldn't be much weaker than Old Lord Tusida. At this moment, the explosion in the 6 Desires heavenly domain finally came to an end. Old Lord Tusida took a step forward and re-entered the desolate domain. His yin-yang pillfish was still fighting with spring white snow, so he couldn't just ignore it. As soon as Old Lord Tusida entered the desolate domain, he saw that Yemazi was seriously injured and flying backwards. Palace Master Wujue was holding spring white snow and constantly plucking the zither strings. She was planning to kill Yemazi in one fell swoop. Old Lord Tusida naturally wouldn't let this happen. He urged the yin-yang pillfish to fall to the side and blocked all of Palace Master Wujue's attacks. "Old Lord Tusida, where's Desireless?" Palace Master Wujue took a few steps back and asked Old Lord Tusida with eyes that were spitting fire. Old Lord Tusida smiled faintly and said, "As long as you hand over the Desireless cultivation technique, I'll tell you Desireless' whereabouts." Palace Master Wujue sneered. Desireless had her mark on him. As long as Desireless was still alive, she could find him. Chapter 2458. Cunning. Palace Master Wujue's pupils shrunk. She immediately tried to sense the imprint on Desireless' body. Indeed, it was as Old Lord Tusida had said. She had indeed lost the connection with the imprint. "You old bastard!" Palace Master Wujue was furious. However, she did not attack again. Old Lord Tusida's strength was not inferior to hers. Furthermore, he was even more proficient in using the yin-yang pill fish in his hand. If she were to continue fighting, she would definitely suffer. Furthermore, when Palace Master Wu Jue fought against Yema Zi, although she managed to injure Yema Zi, she had also suffered serious injuries. If she were to fight against Old Lord Tusida now, she would undoubtedly be at a disadvantage. The corners of Old Lord Tusida's mouth curled into a smile. He said, "Palace Master Wu Jue, I believe that you're a smart person. I don't want the original 6 Desires cultivation technique from you. I only want you to give me a copy of it. After that, I'll give you the whereabouts of Desireless." Palace Master Wu Jue's long, shapely eyebrows slightly creased. However, her eyes were already filled with interest. Compared to the Desireless cultivation technique, Palace Master Wu Jue was naturally more important to Desireless. One must know that it was extremely difficult to obtain such a perfect Desireless. She did not wish to lose Desireless just like that. "The two of you, let's go to the 6 Desires Palace to discuss this matter in detail." Palace Master Wu Jue put away the spring snow and made an inviting gesture. The corners of Old Lord Tusida's mouth curled into a smile. He chuckled and also put away the yin-yang pill fish. Together with Yema Zi, he followed behind Palace Master Wu Jue. Whoosh! 5 days later, a ray of light rapidly streaked across the starry sky. In the end, it stopped in the Pill Furnace star field. Although Zhuowen had spent quite a bit of time following Palace Master Jing Yun to the 6 Desires star field, he only spent 5 days to return. However, Zhuowen knew that the main reason for this was because he had operated the space-time wheel with all his strength. The space-time wheel was many times faster than Palace Master Jing Yun's Flight Divine tool. After Zhuowen returned to the Pill Pagoda, he immediately notified the Second Elder. On the 10th floor of the Pill Pagoda, the Second Elder's gaze was solemn as he looked at Desireless before him. Zhuowen stood to the side, while the pill flame was still lazily lying within the brazier in the center. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, it was at the edge of the brazier. "Second Elder, your knowledge of medicinal pills is much better than mine. Can you take a look at this medicinal powder and see if there's any problem?" Zhuowen took out a jade box and handed it to the Second Elder. Although Zhuowen didn't trust old Monarch Tusida too much, Zhuowen still smeared a portion of the medicinal powder on Desireless' body before leaving. Could it be Palace Master Wu Jue of the 6 Desires Palace? The Second Elder cried out in alarm. Zhuowen bitterly smiled but didn't reply. He knew that he wouldn't be able to explain it clearly in a short time. Seeing that Zhuowen didn't reply, the Second Elder took it as Zhuowen's tacit agreement. He lightly sighed and said, "Do you think that the pill fire will remain in the Pill Pagoda after your clone leaves? I only hope that if you can escape this calamity, you can let your clone return to the Pill Pagoda." Zhuowen was startled. Soon after, he revealed a happy expression and cupped his fists towards the Second Elder, saying, "Many thanks, Second Elder. This Zhuo still has a request. I hope that the Second Elder can agree to it. Don't hesitate to ask. If this old man can help you, I'll definitely help you." The Second Elder said. Zhuowen pointed at Desireless and said, "Second Elder, have you heard of the 6 Desires Palace's Desireless cultivation technique and Desireless?" The Second Elder's gaze turned cold. Soon after, he looked at Desireless and said in astonishment, "You said that this person is Desireless?" "That's right, his 5 senses have all been sealed. This is indeed the sign of Desireless. It's just that in the countless years of the 6 Desires Palace, apart from the founder of the 6 Desires Palace, there hasn't been a Desireless. But now one has actually appeared?" After saying this, the Second Elder looked at Zhuowen. As if he had guessed something, he said, "Do you want to restore this Desireless 6 desires?" Zhuowen nodded seriously and said, "Yes, this woman is a very important friend of mine. If Second Elder knows the method to restore the 6 desires, I hope that Second Elder won't be stingy with your guidance. This Zhuowen will be very grateful." The Second Elder's eyes flickered. He muttered to himself for a while and said, "The 6 Desires Palace's Desireless cultivation technique is extremely famous. However, there are really too few Desireless people. Originally, I was powerless. However, there are records of it in the ancient books of the Pill Pagoda. Wait a moment, I'll go and look for it. After saying this, the second elder entered the depths of the Pill Pagoda. Clearly, he was going to look for the ancient books. As for Jun, a hopeful look appeared in his eyes. Chapter 2459. Alchemy Book. Not long after, the second elder returned with a dilapidated yellow book in his hand. He handed the book over to Juan and said, "This is an alchemy book passed down from our pill tower. However, the content inside is extremely complicated. Even I can't understand it. However, there seems to be a method to restore the 6 desires. Take a look." Juan thanked him and took the alchemy book. When his divine sense swept through the alchemy book, he was immediately dumbfounded. Juan had never seen the words recorded in the alchemy book. Or rather, he couldn't recognize a single word. This wasn't the language of the 8 heavenly domains. The second elder saw Zhuowen's puzzled look and smiled bitterly. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, you don't have to look at me like that. I'm not too sure about this either. This alchemy book is the oldest alchemy book in our pill tower. The words inside are also extremely strange. However, there are some words recorded on the back of this alchemy book. It's about the method to restore the 6 desires. It should be added later on." Zhuan took a closer look. Just as the second elder said, he did see some familiar words on the back of the book. These words should be the pill formula of some kind of pill. There were a total of 6 kinds of divine herbs recorded in the book. However, he only knew 3 of them. There were 2 that he had never heard of before. These 6 divine herbs were the Prime Purity Calamity Heart, Celestial Dipper Crystal, Origin Golden Essence Flower, Void Bone Refining Ginseng, 8 trigrams Dipper Yang Water, and Grand Essence Twin Dragon Ganoderma. Among them, the Prime Purity Calamity Heart, the Heavenly Dipper God Restoring Crystal, and the Origin Golden Essence Flower were all extremely precious level 9 divine herbs. Furthermore, Zhuowen had obtained quite a bountiful harvest in the Divine Pellet's secret realm, so he had 3 level 9 divine herbs with him. However, Zhuowen had never heard of the Void Bone Refining Ginseng, 8 trigrams Dipper Yang Water, and Grand Essence Twin Dragon Ganoderma. Could these 3 be level 9 divine herbs? Second Patriarch had also noticed the confusion in Zhuowen's eyes. He gave a bitter smile and said, "These 6 divine herbs are all the best among all level 9 divine herbs. Among them, the Shangqing Calamity Heart, the Heavenly Dipper Divine Crystal, and the Origin Golden Essence Flower can be found in the Divine Pill's secret realm, but the other 3 divine herbs can't be found even in the Divine Pill's secret realm." Huan nodded and said, "I have these 3 divine medicines on me. Second Elder, do you know where I can get the other 3? The second elder said in a deep voice, "As far as I know, the Great Void Bone Refining Ginseng, the 8 trigrams Divining Yang Water, and the Great Simplicity Double Dragon Ganoderma mainly grow in the heavenly domain of China. I remember that there is an extremely famous dangerous place in the heavenly domain of China called the Boundless Taishu. These 3 divine medicines should grow in that dangerous place." Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He'd never imagined that he would actually have to make a trip back to the heaven domain in the end. Speaking of which, he'd sacrificed himself to help Sky Saint comprehend a trace of the 9th level Tao insight, and then he'd left the heaven domain and never returned. He knew very well that the master-disciple relationship between him and Sky Saint had long been settled at that moment. At the thought of Sky Saint, Thuan thought of Su Qi again. Before Su Qi died, he'd given him a purple jade, and he'd felt the power of Tao insight in that purple jade. Moreover, Su Qi's ancestor had also comprehended Tao insight, and he'd even comprehended the 8th level Tao insight. However, he'd mysteriously disappeared. Zhuan had planned to make a trip to the Su family, but he'd been in a hurry to break through, so he'd gone to the 6 Desires star domain first. Now that the heavenly domain of China was mentioned, Zhuan thought of the Su family again. Back then, the ancestor of the Su family couldn't have disappeared for no reason. It was very likely that there was still some kind of teleportation array or space-time tunnel in the Su family, and that teleportation array or space-time tunnel was very likely to lead to the heavenly domain of China where Sky Saint was. As for what happened to the ancestor of the Su family, Yuan didn't know, but he knew that it definitely wouldn't be good. However, Yuan felt a little helpless now. He knew very well that it would be a little difficult for him to leave the Six Desires heavenly domain now. Now that he'd taken Desireless away, Palace Master Wujue had definitely sealed off the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain. Once he appeared at the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain, Palace Master Wujue would immediately know. At that time, he'd be exposed even faster. Second Elder, can the fragrance of this medicinal powder be concealed? Zhuowen asked anxiously. Zhuowen knew that as long as the fragrance was concealed, even if it was only temporary, it would buy him a lot of time. The Second Elder looked at the brazier behind Zhuowen and said, "The alchemy fire can devour everything related to elixirs. As long as the alchemy fire devours the medicinal powder, not only the fragrance, but the entire medicinal powder will be completely destroyed by the alchemy fire." Upon hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes lit up. He hurriedly asked the black-robed Zhuowen to command the alchemy fire to devour all the medicinal powder in the jade box. However, when the alchemy fire devoured the medicinal powder on Desireless' body, Zhuowen only allowed the alchemy fire to eliminate the fragrance of the medicinal powder. He didn't allow the alchemy fire to devour the medicinal powder. Desireless' body still had the imprint left behind by Palace Master Wujue. If this imprint wasn't covered by the medicinal powder, it would be very easy for Palace Master Wujue to discover it again. After doing all this, Zhuowen discovered that the jade box containing the medicinal powder was actually intact. His gaze turned cold as he ordered the black-robed Zhuowen to place the jade box on an ownerless flying divine tool. Then, he let the flying divine tool fly into the depths of the starry sky. Old Lord Tusida always did things flawlessly. Therefore, Yuan didn't dare to leave any of this old man's things behind. Who knew if this old man had done something to the jade box? After doing all this, Yuan finally let out a sigh of relief. At least, the crisis in front of him had been temporarily resolved. However, he also knew that with the power of the Six Desires heavenly domain, they would eventually find him. As long as he didn't leave the Six Desires heavenly domain, there was a possibility that he would be found. Therefore, he had to first go to the Su family to take a look. If the Su family really had a way to leave the Six Desires heavenly domain, even if it wasn't a good place, he would still give it a try. Second Elder, I have to leave the Pill Pagoda. Otherwise, it will be very easy for me to implicate the Pill Pagoda. Goodbye. Zhuowen cupped his fists towards the Second Elder. Then he withdrew his doppelganger and alchemy fire. As for the Pill Emperor Turtle, it very consciously jumped onto Zhuowen's shoulder. The Second Elder looked at the departing Zhuowen and whispered, I hope that Zhuo can avoid this calamity. When he finally reaches the realm of three extremes, I hope that he can keep his promise and return the alchemy fire to the Pill Pagoda. After leaving the Pill Pagoda, Zhuowen immediately activated the space-time wheel and left the Pill Furnace star field. Chapter 2460. Su Qi's younger sister Wen Zhuowen left the Pill Furnace star zone and headed to the Su family. Palace Master Wujue sent off Old Lord Tusida and Yema Zi with a gloomy face in the Six Desires Palace's plaza. Old Lord Tusida and Yema Zi stayed in the Six Desires Palace for 5 days and finally negotiated with Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue also used these 5 days to order the people of the Six Desires Palace to completely seal off the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain. The defenses of the Six Desires heavenly domain's borders were extremely tight and strict. They were much stronger than the Great Brahma heavenly domain. Moreover, there were several ancient teleportation arrays at the border. Once Zhuowen appeared at the border, Palace Master Wujue could teleport over immediately and capture Zhuowen. After the transaction with Old Lord Tusida, Palace Master Wujue naturally knew that the culprit who took Desireless away was actually Longwen, who was brought over by Palace Master Jingyun. Jingyun, this is all because of your foolishness. After Old Lord Tusida and Yemazi left, Palace Master Wujue impolitely glared at Palace Master Jingyun, who had her head lowered. Seeing that the latter only lowered her head and didn't say anything, Palace Master Wujue didn't say anything either. All of you stay in the Six Desires Palace. I'll chase after that arrogant brat. If news comes from the borders, immediately teleport over and intercept that brat. Palace Master Wujue casually instructed before turning into a stream of light and leaving the Six Desires Star Zone. Several days later, Palace Master Wujue landed in a barren pile of meteorites. According to Old Lord Tusida's method, she followed the fragrance and found this place. After shuttling through the pile of meteorites for a while, Palace Master Wujue immediately discovered a flying-type divine tool not far ahead. At this moment, the flying-type divine tool was completely dim. Clearly, it had exhausted all its energy and was stranded in the pile of meteorites. Found it. The moment Palace Master Wujue saw the flying-type divine tool, her beautiful eyes revealed a pleasantly surprised expression. Palace Master Wujue arrived at the flying-type divine tool and blasted it away. Then, before she could even react, the flying-type divine tool actually self-destructed. Rumble. The terrifying explosive energy was the first to envelop Palace Master Wujue. Palace Master Wujue rushed out of the explosion. Although she was not injured, her clothes were damaged by the explosion. She looked tattered and battered. Bastard! Palace Master Wujue roared furiously. She knew that she had been tricked. Her first reaction was that Old Lord Tusida had tricked her. However, she quickly realized that something was amiss. This flying divine artifact was of an extremely low level. There was no way an expert like Old Lord Tusida would be able to carry such a low-level flying divine artifact. A mere 8 steps Void Sky Ant dares to toy with this Palace Master? If this Palace Master finds you, I'll definitely make you beg for death. Palace Master Wujue quickly thought of the dragon rune. She knew that this cunning fella must have noticed that something was wrong, so he replaced the mark left by Old Lord Tusida. Now, Palace Master Wujue felt somewhat helpless. She could not sense the mark on Desireless' body at all. Clearly, it was still isolated. Trying to find dragon rune now was undoubtedly like trying to find a needle in a haystack. However, Palace Master Wujue was not worried. With the enormous power of the Six Desires Palace, it was actually not difficult to find dragon rune. As long as the borders of the Six Desires heavenly domain were sealed, one would be found in the Six Desires heavenly domain. Thinking of this, Palace Master Wujue decided to return to the Six Desires Palace first. She was prepared to issue a wanted order and use all the forces in the Six Desires heavenly domain to find dragon rune. In the extremely remote starry sky in the northern part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, there was not even a starfield here. There were only planets with thin energy. When Juan saw such a remote place in the northern part of the Six Desires heavenly domain, he could not help but reveal a strange expression. He did not expect that there would be such a remote and backward place in the Six Desires heavenly domain. He knew very well that it was impossible for a void sky expert to exist in such a planet. According to the map that Su Chi had given him, the Su family was on one of these planets. This planet was called the Heavenly Spirit Planet. A stream of light swept out from a dim planet in front of him. Zhuoan immediately intercepted this stream of light. The person intercepted by Zhuoan was a rather innocent-looking woman. To Zhuoan's surprise, this woman's cultivation was only at the demigod realm. Of course, the reason this innocent-looking woman could cross the starry sky was because of the heavenly divine weapon under her feet. Otherwise, she would not have been able to leave the planet at all. At that moment, the innocent-looking woman was intercepted by Zhuoan. Her pretty face immediately revealed a shocked expression. She asked anxiously, "What are you doing? Why are you intercepting me?" When Zhuoan saw this innocent-looking woman, he could not help but be stunned. This woman in front of him was actually very similar to Su Chi, who had died back then. If he did not look carefully, Zhuoan would have thought that this woman was Su Chi. "Miss, what's the relationship between you and Su Chi?" Zhuoan suddenly asked. When the innocent-looking woman heard Su Chi's name, the anxiety on her pretty face could not help but disappear. She quickly said anxiously, "You've seen my sister." Actually, when he was talking to the pure girl just now, he casually blasted out 2 streams of god power and blasted the 2 of them into nothingness. With Zhuowen's current cultivation, dealing with 2 celestial gods was simply bullying the weak. Originally, Yuan wanted to let the 2 of them go. Unfortunately, the 2 of them really didn't understand the situation and still planned to attack him. Naturally, Yuan wouldn't be so kind as to stand still and let the 2 of them kill him. The pure girl frowned slightly, but she felt that something was strange. The hook-nosed man and the bald man had clearly planned to kill the white-clothed youth in front of them. Why did they run away in the blink of an eye? And there was no trace of them at all. Although she was very puzzled by the disappearance of the hook-nosed man and the bald man, the pure girl didn't care much. She had a careless personality to begin with. Since she couldn't figure something out, she would never think too much about it. I still don't know your name, big brother. And are you really my sister's friend? Where is my sister? In the face of the pure girl's barrage of questions, Yuan smiled and said, I'm Jun. I met my sister, Su Qi, by chance in the river of space-time quicksand. Yuan didn't intend to tell her about Su Qi's death. He knew that if he said it now, the pure girl in front of him might change her expression. His goal this time was the Su family. It wasn't easy to meet someone from the Su family, so he naturally wanted her to lead him to the Su family. If she hated him because of Su Qi's death, then the gains wouldn't make up for the losses. I'm Su. Since you're my sister's friend, then you're my friend. By the way, you haven't told me where my sister is yet. Su said anxiously. Su's cultivation wasn't high, and she lived in such a remote place. She had never heard of the famous river of space-time quicksand, so she wasn't surprised when she heard that Zhuan had met Su Qi in the river of space-time quicksand. Zhuan said apologetically, Miss Su Qi and I parted ways after leaving the river of space-time quicksand. As for where she is now, I'm not too sure. Perhaps she'll come back in the future. Hearing this, Su's eyes showed disappointment, but she was clearly an optimist. She said with a smile, although my sister had a conflict with our family many years ago, I know that she has always been concerned about the Su family. I believe that she will definitely change her mind and come back in the future. Looking at Su's hopeful face, Yuan sighed in his heart. He knew that Su Qi would never come back, but he wouldn't say this, at least not for now. Big brother Zhuan, will you come back to the Su family with me? Su looked at him and asked. Zhuan's expression brightened. Naturally, he quickly agreed. His goal this time was the Su family. Seeing that Zhuan had agreed, Su was naturally very happy. The 2 of them chatted happily on their way back to Heavenly Spirit Planet. Zhuan also realized that Su was indeed very simple. Clearly, she was a girl who had never experienced great storms. During the conversation, Zhuan also roughly understood the distribution of forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. In this remote area in the north, there weren't even any galaxies, let alone star fields. The only things that existed were these scattered planets. Of course, the laws of these planets were much better than the Heavenly Armor Planet, so they could nurture heavenly god-level experts. Some powerful planets could even nurture true god-level experts. There were only 2 true god-level experts on Heavenly Spirit Planet. One of them was the patriarch of the Ling family, and the other was the patriarch of the Su family. The Ling family and the Su family were considered the 2 most powerful forces on Heavenly Spirit Planet. As the saying goes, where there are people, there will be conflicts. Moreover, there can't be 2 tigers on one mountain. The Ling family and the Su family had always been at odds with each other, and there was always friction on Heavenly Spirit Planet. However, it was usually only a small-scale conflict. This time, however, the Ling family had gone crazy. They actually openly challenged the Su family and threatened to kick the Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Planet. The Su family naturally refused, so the 2 families immediately clashed and started a large-scale battle. There were countless casualties. Chapter 2462. SS Blood Fiend Array Su was the second miss of the Su clan. Now that the Su clan was in imminent danger, Su was ambushed by the Ling clan during a battle. All the people she brought were annihilated, and even she was almost captured. If it wasn't for the Su clan's old ancestor giving her a flying divine tool, Su would have become a prisoner of the Ling clan. Of course, Su could have returned to the Su family. Unfortunately, two divine realm experts from the Ling family chased after her. In the end, Su had no choice but to leave Heavenly Spirit Planet. Su also knew that once she left Heavenly Spirit Planet, it would be difficult to return. Therefore, she planned to find her sister, Su Qi. Su Qi was the most talented genius of the Su family. The Su family's patriarch knew that after so many years, Su Qi's cultivation would at least be at the true God realm. She might even break through the true God realm and reach the virtual sky realm. As long as he could find Su Qi, the Su family's revenge would naturally be avenged. Speaking of the Su family, Su frowned. She sighed and said, "The patriarch's strength is actually more powerful than the patriarch of the Ling family. Unfortunately, the patriarch of the Ling family got that consumable divine weapon from somewhere and actually injured our patriarch. Now, the Ling family is waiting for our patriarch to fall. Then, they will launch an all-out attack and completely occupy our Su family." Speaking of this, Su felt helpless. At the same time, she looked at Juan apologetically and said, "Big brother Zhua, you're a guest. It's only right to invite you to the Su family." However, the Su family situation is not optimistic. If Big brother Zhua feels that it's inappropriate, you don't have to go back with me. Zhuan smiled and said, "What's inappropriate? Moreover, I'm quite knowledgeable about pills. Perhaps if you bring me back, I can help your patriarch take a look." Su was a simple person. Seeing that Zhuan knew about medicine, she actually believed him immediately. However, Zhuan secretly shook his head. Su, this little girl, was not scheming. If he had any evil intentions, this girl would definitely die. After a while, the two of them went deep into Heavenly Spirit Planet. As soon as Zhuan entered Heavenly Spirit Planet, he shook his head. The spirit energy on this planet was really lacking. Although it was much better than on Heavenly Armor Planet, Zhuan was no longer the young boy who had just left Heavenly Armor Planet. After so many years of cultivation, he had been to the Taiching Immortal Realm, the Brahma Heaven Palace, and the Six Desires Palace. Which one of them wasn't a top-notch place in the Heaven Domain? He had even been to many dangerous and even treasured places. Even the planets in the Ziwei galaxy that Zhuan had taken into Devour's body were much more intelligent than this heavenly spirit star. It could be seen how scarce the earth and heaven energy in this star was. However, it was precisely because of the scarcity and remoteness of this place that Zhuan chose to come here. Otherwise, the chances of being discovered by the Six Desires Palace would be too high if he went to those bustling galaxies and star regions. Moreover, most of the areas on Heavenly Spirit Planet were ruins left behind by battles. Clearly, this planet was not peaceful. When Zhuan's gaze fell on the broken walls left behind by the war, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise, arousing Su's suspicion. "Brother Zhua, what's wrong with you? Is there something strange?" Su asked doubtfully. Zhuan shook his head and said with a smile, "No, let's continue moving forward." Hearing this, Su didn't doubt him and continued to lead the way. However, what she didn't see was that after she turned around, Zhuan's eyes suddenly became gloomy. Just now, Zhuan's divine sense casually swept across those battlefields and immediately found some clues. Later, he used his divine sense to investigate further and found that there was a man-made array under each battlefield. Zhuan had never arranged this array before, but he had heard of it before. It was called the Blood Evil Array. The Blood Evil Array was a kind of array that absorbed the blood chi of the human body and gathered it in the array to transform it into a huge amount of cultivation energy. The advantage of this array was that it could make the cultivation speed of the cultivator extremely fast. After all, the blood chi was the energy of the human body, so the cultivator didn't need to convert it at all and could directly absorb it. However, the reason why the Blood Evil Array was so insidious was that this Blood Evil Array would not only absorb the blood chi of cultivators, but also powerless mortals. It was very common for cultivators to kill each other, but to kill innocent mortals was a practice that went against the laws of nature. Even if this kind of cultivator cultivated very quickly, The end result was basically very miserable. According to Zhuowen's knowledge, most of the people who used the blood evil array were evil cultivators. They were disgusting people who hoped to use improper methods to quickly improve their cultivation. Thinking of this, Zhuowen's heart was filled with murderous intent. If it was possible, he would go back and find that evil cultivator and kill him now. However, when his divine sense went deep into the battlefields, he only found the blood evil array and didn't find the evil cultivator. Since he was determined to kill that evil cultivator, Yuan naturally didn't want to act rashly and alert the enemy. Otherwise, that evil cultivator would definitely escape. Moreover, Jun faintly felt that this battle on Heavenly Spirit Star was very likely related to that evil cultivator. Miss Su Su, was this battle started by the Ling family? Zhuowen asked casually. Su Su was leading the way in front. When she heard Zhuowen's question, she nodded and said, "Yes, I don't know what's wrong with that Ling family. They said that they want to chase our Su family out of Heavenly Spirit Star and even instigated all the cultivators on Heavenly Spirit Star. Even many innocent mortals were involved. The battle between cultivators has nothing to do with mortals, but that Ling family." Speaking of this, Su Su's beautiful eyes revealed a look of resentment. It was obvious that she deeply hated the Ling family. Zhuowen nodded. He was now basically certain that the Ling family should be related to that evil cultivator. Otherwise, it wouldn't be so coincidental. Soon, the two of them arrived at Suzhou City where the Su family was located. Suzhou City's defense was quite strong. There were powerful restrictions all around, emitting bursts of flowing light. However, the formations and restrictions in Suzhou were only a threat to cultivators below the Void Sky stage. They were not worth mentioning for Void Sky cultivators. This was because the restrictions on Suzhou City were at most a level 1 array. Even a virtual Sky Realm cultivator might not necessarily be able to defend against it. Big Brother Zhuo, this level 1 array was purchased by our Su family's ancestor from the Gulan Galaxy. I heard that the Gulan Galaxy is one of the most powerful galaxies in the entire Six Desires Heavenly Realm. Speaking of Suzhou City's level 1 array, Su Su's beautiful face revealed a trace of pride. She couldn't help but raise her head and puff out her chest as she introduced it to Zhuan. Zhuan was a little speechless. However, this level 1 array was indeed enough on Heavenly Spirit Star. True God cultivators couldn't break this array at all. After Su Su took out her identity token, she brought Zhuowen into Suzhou City smoothly. Suzhou City was quite calm at this moment. The cultivators passing by all looked hurried and worried. It's all because of the war. Chapter 2463. Su family's old ancestor, young lady Su Su, you're all right. I was so worried. Suddenly, an excited voice came from nearby. Then, a middle-aged man walked over with a group of soldiers and stopped in front of Su Su. His face was filled with excitement. Uncle Xiao, I thought I would never see you again. Su Su was pleasantly surprised. She couldn't help but hold the middle-aged man's hands. There was even a trace of mist in her eyes. Zhuan silently looked at the middle-aged man in front of him and frowned. The man's words just now were too abrupt. His tone was as if he already knew something would happen to Su Su. Previously, Su Su could be said to have told him everything. She even told him about being chased. It was said that she was ambushed by the enemy. In the end, she relied on the flying divine tool given to her by the Su family's old ancestor to escape. Su Su seemed to have only told him about this. As for this middle-aged man, he shouldn't have known. However, when the middle-aged man saw that Su Su was back, his first sentence was a little strange. This made Zhuowen suspicious. Of course, Su Su didn't notice the problem in the middle-aged man's words. At this moment, she was reminiscing with the middle-aged man. Young master, thank you for saving young lady Su Su. I am Su Xiao, the Su family's head steward. You are young lady Su Su's savior. The Su family owes you a debt of gratitude. Please accept my bow. The middle-aged man came in front of Zhuan. His face was filled with gratitude and he was about to bow to Zhuan. Zhuan stood in the same place and didn't move. He didn't stop the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man's originally bowed body stiffened. His eyes revealed a bone-chilling coldness. However, since Yun didn't show any courtesy, he could only take the opportunity to bow deeply to Yun. So, it's the steward of the Su family. You're too polite. Actually, I didn't help much. The two people who were chasing after us suddenly left for some reason. So, I can only say that Miss Su Su and I are lucky. Zhuowen smiled. The middle-aged man stood up. His expression was not very good, but he still smiled and said, "No matter what, young Master Zhuo, you saved our young lady's life. Now, please follow this old man back to the Su family. Also, young lady, I have already informed the patriarch that you have returned. He said that he wants to see you." "The patriarch is awake. That's great. Big brother Zhuo, come with us," Su Su exclaimed in surprise. However, the middle-aged man stopped the two of them. Shortly after, the middle-aged man looked at Su Su apologetically and said, "Miss, after all, this person isn't from our Su family. Moreover, the ancestor only summoned you. Let him follow." The middle-aged man didn't finish his words, but a troubled expression appeared on his face. Su Su, on the other hand, said carelessly, "Uncle Xiao, don't worry. Big brother Zhuo isn't an outsider. He's friends with my sister. Hasn't the ancestor always wanted to know my sister's whereabouts? Now that big brother Zhuo has brought it over, he will definitely be happy." The middle-aged man's gaze froze. Shortly after, he sized up Zhuan. However, Zhuan could sense the coldness in the middle-aged man's gaze. He couldn't help but sneer in his heart. "So you're the young lady's friend. Young master, it's not that this old man doesn't believe you, but the young lady has left the Su family for a long time. How can you prove that you're the young lady's friend?" The middle-aged man's tone was cold. Su Su's beautiful eyes froze. She said with some displeasure, "Uncle Xiao, big brother Zhuo is my savior. It's not good for you to doubt him like this. Miss, now is the time when the Su family and the Ling family are at war. Some people have unknown origins. They might be from the Ling family, so it's best for you to be vigilant," the middle-aged man continued. Su Su's expression turned ugly. She coldly snorted and said, "Uncle Xiao, thank you for your reminder. I'll go see the patriarch now." After saying that, Su Su brought Zhuan and walked past the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man didn't stop them. Instead, he turned to look at Zhuowen's back. His eyes revealed a contemplative look. "Big brother Zhuo, I'm sorry. Uncle Xiao is a cautious person, so he might have said something inappropriate just now. I hope you don't take it to heart." Su Su apologized to Zhuan. "It's fine. My origins are indeed unknown. Your Uncle Xiao is right. But why does Miss Su Su believe me so much?" Zhuan looked at Su Su in surprise. "Because I feel that you're not a bad person, so you're definitely not a bad person," Su Su said with a smile. Hearing such an answer, Zhuan was speechless. After entering the Su family's mansion, because of Su Su, the two of them were naturally unimpeded. They went straight to the Su family's patriarch's pavilion. The Su family's patriarch's pavilion was heavily guarded. There were even other restrictions outside the pavilion. Could be said that it was airtight. Of course, to Zhuowen, these restrictions were no different than nothing. "Second miss, this person can't go in." The guard stopped Zhuowen and looked at Su Su as he said, "He's my savior and my sister's friend. The patriarch definitely wants to see him. If you don't inform him, how do you know the patriarch won't let him in?" Su Su said with a glare. When the guard seemed to be saying something, an old voice came from the pavilion, "Let them in." The guard cupped his hands towards the pavilion and no longer stopped Chun. Then, the two of them entered the depths of the pavilion. The pavilion's decoration was extremely simple. Other than a wooden bed, there was a wooden table and a few stools. Apart from that, there was nothing else in the pavilion. On the wooden bed, an old man with a head full of silver hair sat cross-legged. His face was pale and his breathing was chaotic. After Su Su and Zhuowen entered, the old man opened his eyes. He looked at Su Su kindly and said, "Su, you scared me to death. When you activated the flying divine artifact, I thought you were in some kind of life and death crisis." Su came to the bedside and naturally hugged one of the old man's arms. She said coquettishly, "Patriarch, it's all thanks to my luck. Of course, there's also Brother Zhu's help." As she spoke, Su began to talk about what happened when they were running for their lives. The old man listened very carefully. "Friend, thank you for saving Su." The old man looked at Zhuowen with a kind smile, but soon he looked straight at Zhuowen with a serious expression. Then he said to Su, go out for a moment. I have something to say to this little friend." Su pouted and said, "What is it that you need to hide from me?" The old man stroked Su's hair and said with a smile, "Su, be good. I really have something important to say to this little friend. Don't be willful, okay?" Although Su was very unwilling, she didn't want to disobey the patriarch's order. She could only reluctantly nod and leave the pavilion. In the empty pavilion, only the old man and Zhuowen were left. "Purple jade is in your hands. What did you do to Chia?" The old man's eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Zhuowen. "You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.